Order. Can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as you can see, we've returned to a face-to-face format tonight. We have limited ourselves to just the 5 committee members, superintendent, assistant superintendent, and the director of business and finance. We have spread ourselves out to maintain social distance. The meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. Although we are not allowing in-person participation at this point, community members were encouraged to submit comments and questions through the school committee members or superintendent of schools, Dr. J. Lang, via email. These comments will be read under the public participation portion of the agenda. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, they're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting, and we'll read those during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. Okay, before we start with tonight's agenda items, I would like to ask that we observe a moment of silence for several members of the Chelmsford school community that have recently passed away, including Miss Susan Santa Barbara, who recently retired as a teacher at Chelmsford Center School, and 2 of our Chelmsford Public Schools students. Thank you. Okay, our first agenda item tonight is approval of the minutes for our meeting on June 16th.
I move that we approve.
That was a no vote.
I move that we approve the minutes from the meeting of June 22nd?
June 16th.
June 16th, sorry. That's
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any corrections, any comments, questions on the minutes? Okay, all in favor of approval?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Okay, next up, good news. Any good news that anybody would like to share?
Good news, our literacy program is in, it's sorted, and every school has their books. So all our materials in, and the teachers are excited, because I've been showing pictures out to everyone, and they're like, can we come in and get our stuff? And I said, not yet, but they're very excited for it. And other than that, everything else has been going fine. We're at the beginning of our summertime, and we're just getting ready for the beginning of the school year.
Great. Okay, anybody else have any good news they'd like to share? Okay, all right, we have one of our student representatives is here with us tonight. Sudeep, anything you'd like to share before we?
Hello, guys. Nice to see you guys again. Last time Donna asked us what she wanted us to do in the school for Black History and things like that. And me and Katrina thought of some ideas, and this is what we wanted to share. So for in February, it's Black History Month. So we thought we could dedicate a whole week in February focused on Black history in all history classes and grades to raise awareness on this issue. And then also, like, another one we could do is we could create a pride block to discuss issues of racial inequality and just praise equality for all and, like, really set that tone. And also in the Learning Commons, like, make the Black history literature area more noticeable and stand out to the people so that people can read and learn about it. I mean, if we're spreading this information, like, we just want everyone who can get it, like, so that they know. And it's better if everyone is more educated on the issue, because it will be less of a problem and it will spread more awareness, and I think that's better for everyone if people are aware on the issue.
Thank you very much for doing that. Could you do me a favor and leave me your notes? So
Yeah.
that way we have them. Thank you. But thank you both for taking the time to put that together.
All right, thank you, Sudeep.
Good suggestions.
Okay, next agenda item, public comment. If any members have received any emails with questions or comments, this would be the time to share them. Do you have any emails they want to share?
Throughout the meeting. It's particular items.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, I just have some, general ones from parents that are concerned with the DESE guidelines and all that, so, I'm sure that we'll be discussing DESE guidelines later on, so, okay. All right, guess we're moving on to new business.
Sure, thank you. So we're going to try something different, as Dennis had mentioned earlier. The school committee's meeting, but our meetings are still closed to public participation. But one of our presentations tonight is from Nancy Antolini, our school nutrition services director. No, I'm trying to do 2 things at the same time.
I know.
our school nutrition director, and Nancy has a little overview of how this past school year went for us. And what we're going to try to do is, she's going to be our first contestant here, to see if we're able to do this remote meeting, because if it works well, this will be a way for us to open up participation from the public in future meetings. We can set up a go-to-meeting link and do this. So, Nancy, you're now back on, and can you hear me? All right. Give me 1 second. What I'm going to do is get your presentation up and going. All right, Nancy, so I have your presentation up, and if you would like to walk us through it, and then if there are any slides you want me to advance, I'll advance them for you. It's just easier for me to do that than for you to do that remotely. And just for the viewing audience at home, this PowerPoint presentation shows on Chelmsford Telemedia, so they'll follow the PowerPoint presentation, and then they'll also hear Nancy's narrative. So you can go ahead, Nancy.
So I just want to first of all thank everyone for the support you showed through service during the COVID situation. We want to thank you all. I want to thank the flowers that you left us and the banner that you put up for us. So first I want to start at the beginning of this year from August until March. We served 321,128 meals. We were really on a good track for this year. We were very excited about it. And we were actually, yeah.
Nancy, you with us?
Oh, boy.
Forecasting that
Yes, she is.
this year that in the following, the 2021, the $3 we feel was all comments stayed bid. Our dairy bid is staying with New England ice cream, and that's also for our ice cream and our milk. Our grocery bid will be with Thurston. Our bread bid will be with Fantini, and our fresh pizza will roll over with Gil's Pizza. After March 13th, we got together really quickly. We placed together a grab and go that we served, started on March 18th, on the Wednesday after. We put together grab and go, and we served all the families that came, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And in March, we had 419 families over the course of the 2 weeks, and we sold a total of 5,310 meals. In April, we had 1,496 families come through, and we served a total of 17,601 meals. In May, we had 1,534 families come through, and we served a total of 18,048 meals. Again, this included breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And in June, we had 466 families were served, and that was a total of 5,457 meals. And we ended the program on June 14th. So in the future, what we're looking at for possible solutions when we all start our committee groups, but some research I've been looking into with other districts, and the things we're looking at possible online pre-ordering for parents. They would be able to go right into send money to school where they're going now to state for lunches. We would go online and they could pre-order up to 1 week. And that would actually, even if we end up going a hybrid return, we could still do, who would need meals at home and would be picking them up, or who would be having meals in school. So they've really simplified that for us, and they would have it up and running in August, which is pretty quick. Some of the other ideas we're looking at is food kiosks that are in the hallways, so that would keep the students socially distant. In the secondary schools, you'd have the kiosks, and they could right away pre-order their meals at the kiosk for 1 week at a time. Then in the elementary levels, we're looking maybe a breakfast and lunch in the classrooms. Most of our lunches with Jesse is saying to us that we should look definitely at prepackaging on our meals. So we're looking into special containers for that would be labeled, and the students would only pick up their lunch that's pre-labeled. And we're getting a lot of waivers saying that we don't have to serve all the different types of vegetables and things each day. and if that way there's already been passed. So, everything would be prepackaged, and I think parents would be very happy knowing that there weren't any handling the food. So the name would be on, and the child would just pick up their container and walk away. The other thought they're having is using the high school as a commissary for all of the schools, so everything would come out of the high school, and that way we could do like
It's frozen. We'll have to give her a second to try to come back. Nancy, you're frozen on us if you can hear us.
She better off calling in and talking,
I'm not sure.
because I can just call her and put her up to the mic.
Well, this is almost a good test for us to just see what difficulties we're gonna have with the public going forward.
Sounds like she's on.
Well, will we see if we can reconnect with her? She cut out a little bit a couple of slides ago.
She's back.
oh,
Are you back, Nancy?
okay.
Yep.
We're
Yeah.
back.
Oh, you're back.
And
All right, we lost you at the end of the future presentation slide, where you were talking about prepackaging prepared meals for students.
okay. So the prepackaging, without not bringing in a company or anything, we have, we're looking at different paper goods that we could use for prepackaging and labeling our own foods. So the student could come right through and pick up their own meal with their name on it and the ingredients right on it. Less handling of the food, which we're trying to, that's one of the things that telling us. And then using the high school as a commissary to feed all the other schools, that would keep us, we'd be able to be socially distanced in that school. We've already been up there during the whole COVID, and we really worked well up there. Staff training is when, the official regulations I've decided by the district, school nutrition department will begin to train to ensure the health and safety of students and the staff. Personal goals we have is to continue to grow professional development and team building with school nutrition staff, and as I was saying, but you didn't hear me, during this whole COVID, we really did build a great team. It really did a lot for us as a team. We're going to continue to develop scratch cooking recipes because, as I said, we can package that ourselves and still give students a nice healthy meal. And our number one is, of course, achieving a smooth transition to the new normal. My personal professional accomplishment this year, I was elected the School Nutrition Association. I was elected vice president, so I'll serve 4 years on School Nutrition Association board. So I'm really excited about that on my way. So I thank you, and if you have any questions for me.
Any questions? People, I guess you'd have to relay them through.
Yeah, so if people have questions, I can relay them to Nancy. A couple of highlights of this presentation from my standpoint. Our food service lunch costs are not going to increase next year. So we had enough costs built in so that we're not going to have to increase that next year. So they would stay the same. That was significant. The bidding all came in line for the products for next year, so we don't have any issues on that front. I do want to thank Nancy and the staff. I thought they did an outstanding job this past March through June, opening up the feeding site at the high school. Quick math, I was just eyeballing it. It was like over 35,000 meals that were served to families in the community. And, you know, we served not only to our own students, but, you know, any family member that needed help during the time. Her staff really stepped up and helped with that. So just appreciative of those efforts.
Yeah. Can I add to that just for a minute? First of all, I want to really emphasize that the entire food services team, you guys stepped up like crazy. And you really stepped up at a time when people were scared to even be in the same location together. but you did it for other people and to serve the community, including our students and their families, but the community, and that means a lot. So really, congratulations, Nancy, to you and the team, and a debt of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Other questions people might have? I don't know if Nancy can answer it. Some of these other possible things that fall, the food kiosks, prepackaged, is that gonna involve extra cost to us? Do you think?
Nancy, have you, some of those different, I know we don't know yet what the format of school is gonna look like in the fall, and I know all the different nutrition groups across the state are looking at different options that might be implemented. Do you have any sense of like what additional costs might be if we had to use the high school as a commissary and prepackage and send out to the schools, or if we were to utilize the kiosk type model? Is there a lot of additional costs that would be involved, or do we know yet if the Department of Ed will be making any grants available to districts to help with some of those costs, particularly in the first year?
Well, the grants are available. There would be some additional costs. The kiosks that we're looking at, they are a little expensive. They're on the more expensive side. We would need more bags. We own quite a few bags already, but we would need more bags. So our truck to take them out. We have two vehicles that we can actually transport the food to if we use it as a commissary up at the high school. So there would be. We already have warmers, things like that. We probably, the little expenses we're gonna have that's a little bit extra money is that we'd have to go to the ketchup. Now we use ketchup that's in bottles and all. Now we'd have to go to individual little cups. Our flatware, our silverware would have to be prepackaged now. So those are little expenses, but that we would have to go out to bid now for those. Because we did not bid for that. No, we bid before this all happened. So, but other than that, we're pretty good with our equipment.
All right, thank you.
We really are.
I think the other positive we'll touch on later when we get to the financial report, but that the food service program, even with paying for some of the enhancements that we've been able to provide, is still generating a positive balance at the end of the year, and is actually kind of growing a little bit. So we're really sitting on a very healthy reserve in food services. If we need to spend a little bit of extra money for the get-go this coming fall, we certainly have that capacity. We could help on the district side, but the food fund itself has a very healthy reserve to be able to help with that.
Okay.
Have we heard anything from the state level or federal level? Because I know that we qualified for some reimbursement. Is there any continuation of that or any additional funds from them to deal with all of this going forward?
I don't have anything official. I don't know if either Joanna or Nancy does. We did end up receiving the reimbursement for the food that we served through June. We didn't participate in any of the summer feeding site programs. I don't know in the fall if we end up in that same situation again. I don't know if we're automatically qualify to be able to get reimbursed, or there would be like another process. I would have to think if we ended up in a remote learning environment again, that we would qualify for that designation to be reimbursed. But I know all of our operating costs from March to June were covered. Do you happen to know anything specific?
Right, so there's kind of two forms of reimbursement. There's this seamless summer, so that's what reimbursed us for this stand-up program that Nancy's team did, and that was for the student meals. And then there was the separate reimbursement from the town through the grant. So we'll make, and that's the approximately 70,000. So we're whole. Then next fall, best case, we go back to our regular reimbursement through the USDA and all that. And then it looks like those things could continue. Seamless summer, because Nancy's already applied, and we can stand that back up if we'd like. And then the unsure piece is the grant again from the town. Like, we knew that was a for sure.
Is that the CARES?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, but, so we'd have to pursue that more if we get into a position where we want to do adult meals sometime in the future. Did that answer it?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, anything else from, any other questions or comments? Anybody?
Can I just?
Yeah.
If we, whatever model we enter into, and if you have to serve meals, let's say at every classroom, I've seen it, a picture of it in Europe, in some of the European schools where, food service delivers the stack of trays to a classroom and they eat right in the classroom. Let's say we were to do that, or some other model where you're packing up the meals. Are we okay on the equipment and the materials that we need to order and so on in advance? How much of a lead time would Nancy need and her team to get the supplies that we need? Because I'm sure everybody else will do the same.
Yeah, can I jump in, Nancy? So on this one, Nancy had just mentioned, if we end up in a situation like that, it would be likely that we would do those, our own kind of packaged meals. And we do have equipment now to be able to do that. That's how we actually use the high school as the commissary. We produce all our meals and then we travel them out to the elementary schools.
Okay.
So that's already in place at the elementary level. The equipment's there. Obviously, we would just be using more supply than we typically would. But again, I think that's where the funding would come into play. I'm confident we wouldn't have a problem for the September start.
Okay.
I think it's again, from an attraction standpoint, when you get to the middle school, the high school, I think the struggle we're gonna have is those kids like to really go through the line and kind of pick what they want, and so I just don't know how this is gonna affect our participation levels. I think that's a concern statewide as far as food is concerned. If you can't really pick what you're eating, it might be less attractive to you, so I don't know how that's gonna impact our serve numbers. But, no, I think we'll be equipped to provide whatever we have to, in that case.
Okay. I've heard of, you get to pre-order, so we'll become like McDonald's or whatever, and deliver the meal with the kid's name with the student's name right on it. I've heard of that process, but just wondering if we have, the materials. It sounds like we do.
I think Nancy would be in good shape for that. Yeah, she's shaking her head. So I think we would be in good shape for that. We would just be using more product than
We'll
we
be
typically
better
would.
than McDonald's, Nancy, okay? You tell me what the comparable is, okay? That was a bad example.
Yeah. Hi, we're shooting high. We're very
We're
high.
shooting high. This is it.
Huh?
Or at least on a Panera level.
Yeah, we're high. But Nancy, thank you very
Definitely.
much. Personally, congratulations also on being elected the vice president of the group. That's a very significant honor statewide. Nancy has really put a lot of time into the group, so I wanted to recognize that for you. We love working with you, and thank you for all you did this spring to keep us going.
Thank you.
Thank you
Nancy.
very much.
Thank you.
So that worked out all right.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I don't know.
Couple of bugs,
Yeah, what we'll have to figure out is were the connectivity issues on our end or on Nancy's end.
Yeah.
And then just the volume of speakers and things like that. But it was a good trial, so we'll be able to work that out going forward.
So was she hearing us through your computer, or is it?
Yeah, she was hearing, so she joined with me.
Yeah.
So she basically heard me talking, but she was actually,
Yeah, that's what I was
she heard
surprised.
Maria
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know she heard Donna's
Yeah,
question
that's what I
too.
was surprised.
So I'm not sure if maybe she's also picking up just the mic over the room coming through as well.
Yeah.
Now, what a person watching from home could do is have telemedia on and be kind of watching the meeting so that they could hear what's happening and be able to participate.
Although
I don't
that
know
might-
if we
that might
get
feedback, though.
any feedback.
Yeah, that might feedback if you had it on on a TV.
Well, if you were muted here,
Yeah,
though,
true.
up until the time where you were going to speak, you'd at least get the flavor of what's happening in the meeting. It's a start, I thought that was fairly successful. So we'll see where that goes.
Okay. All right, next item, Chelmsford Public Schools Year in Review.
Yes, so this is, I typically do this each, at the end of the school year. It was a little more difficult, obviously, this year because we didn't have a lot of closure on some of the projects that we started out. But I'd like to just give you a little running record of some of the major accomplishments for the district. And again, looking back, I actually can't believe I'm just completing my 5th year here. It seems like just yesterday when I came. So it has been 5 years. I think the school year really started off on a positive note. It was like every other school year, and then all of a sudden, after February vacation, we started hearing the word COVID, and then by March 13th, we were actually out a little bit. So when that particular weekend had come, just as way of background, we were getting some different reads from the state. You know, was the state going to actually close schools? Were they not? Our district decided with other districts in the Merrimack Valley to basically take a 2-week closure to kind of regroup and see where we're at that weekend. The state ended up extending that for 3 weeks. It got pushed to the end of May, then it got pushed right to the end of June. So our staff and students left on the 13th and didn't come back for the rest of the school year. So this is, you know, truly unprecedented times. And I think, you know, given the circumstances, remote learning and the whole experience was very difficult on everyone. It was difficult on parents, it was difficult on students, staff, but I really do think everyone rose to the occasion and made the very best of a tough situation. We, again, for the first couple of weeks, really tried to work with staff around maintaining that contact with students, which we know is so critical. We needed a little bit of time to get staff, you know, make sure they have the equipment that they need, give them some professional development training on Google Classroom, things like that. But we wanted to make sure that they had those connections with kids. We then also started to add some enrichment activities to keep learning going, to keep kids engaged in learning. And then the teachers really, within about a 2-week time cycle, switched over to more, not direct in-person instruction, but more teacher-led instruction. And that, you know, basically kind of carried us through the end of the school year. And again, it was exhausting for everyone, but I really do think that everyone stepped up and did as good a job as they could have under the circumstances. So all went well on that front. If we go back to the beginning of the year, a couple of things, you know, for more practical operationally, you know, we had another successful year audit-wise. So every year we have to have a financial audit, and we had another year, fiscal 2019 audit. Joanna and her staff in the business office do a very good job with all their financial reporting. As you know, the committee gets monthly reports, we do a quarterly presentation, and then our end-of-the-year report gets audited by external group, and another successful year on that front. As we're looking to close fiscal 20, again, we're a couple of weeks away from the official close of the year, which ended on June 30th. We're still doing some transactions, but we're really finishing the year off in very strong financial footing and position. On the special ed side, we're going to carry over the maximum, which is right about $3 million next year for unanticipated sped costs. That's significant because it can go towards out-of-district tuitions, it can go towards transportation. Again, 5 years ago, we were actually in a hole money-wise, and we've really built that reserve up, so that's a very strong fund to carry. I mentioned earlier also Nancy with food services.
So I just wanted to make sure we clarify that special education transportation, right?
Special ed transportation.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, anything related to special ed
I
students.
just want to make sure that people understood that it's only for special ed transportation.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, circuit breaker is only for any kind of sped-related costs. And as I'm going through this, if people want to interrupt me, please, you know, if you've got questions, something, I'm happy to do that. Getting a lot of feedback, sorry. You know, food we talked a little bit about earlier as well. So, you know, we do have just under $750,000 is going to be our balance in the food fund, which is phenomenal. A lot of districts are really just trying to get by, and they're lucky if they break even at the end of the year. But we're in solid footing on that front. And again, that would actually be money that we could use if we had to buy some extra supplies, some extra equipment to do whatever kind of plan we had to for the fall. And then lastly, you know, we do have that set aside for school choice, which is $1.7 million, probably at the end of the school year, right around there. Now, we've earmarked that to pay for the 101 initiative and the recurring annual lease costs. But again, that's a significant kind of cushion of money that's going right now. It's earmarked towards the 101 initiative, but that does give the committee flexibility if we ever get into next year and there's a budgetary shortfall. That is a fund that's at the discretion of the committee. So again, that's nice that we've been able to kind of build that up to provide us that flexibility. When we then got into the fall, what originally started out as a regular, you know, budget cycle, typically right around Thanksgiving, Christmas time, we end up starting to put together our budget requests for the following school year. We had done so at the end of January. We presented a recommended budget to the school committee. In February, we reviewed that budget. We had done a line-by-line analysis, and we were in line at that point in time with what the town manager's recommendation was going to be, moving up $2 million from 61 to 63 million. The week right after the 13th, we were set to go to FinCom, and then obviously we'd all hope Springtown meeting would have happened in April, and the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and everything was kind of on hold. I think as a town, we really did a nice job of coming back together. in the end of May and kind of figuring out what we should do so that we could have a budget in place. A lot of communities at this point are really moving towards a 1/12 budget, which is very difficult to manage, both on the town and school side. So I'm actually happy that we were able to come to some agreement and start the year with an actual budget. What we were able to do was basically, or what we assumed was a 20% reduction, which we all really hope is worst-case scenario, so I don't see it being worse than that. If anything, potentially we might receive more money next year. But that 20% reduction on the school side equated to about $1.4 million in the reduction that we had to make. So I think we did that, strategically, not altering what we had set out to do when it came to programs and services for fiscal '21. But we were able to pre-purchase that elementary literacy program. We had money in '20. We earmarked $250 in '21. We were able to shift that because we had extra money in '20, make that purchase up front. We were also able to prepay for some of our retirement costs, which were significant. And then lastly, we had savings from the both regular ed and sped transportation in the springtime. Those funds basically were transferred to prepay for special education tuitions, and then we were able to reduce in fiscal '21 what our special education budget will be. So that's how we balance the budget. I don't think it would have worked if we weren't all on the same page. We weren't working hand in hand with the town to make that all possible. And I was happy that when we went to town meeting, although it was difficult to hear everyone that night, and it was a little warm, that, unanimously our budget passed, and really all the different town budgets that were presented, I thought were well received. People asked some good questions, but all in all, it was great to get that behind us so that we can start next year with an actual budget in place. In the midst of everything going on, just a couple of other things we don't want to forget about. Last year was, and it actually was quite timely, the launch of the one-on-one initiative. So all of our students in the last year's, incoming 5th grade, incoming 9th grade, were supplied with a district-issued Chromebook. Our teaching staff were as well, and they also had some professional development and training around using them, using Google Classroom, the different Google apps. And I think that was actually significant because it helped as we had to go remote that spring. There was already some familiarity with the products we were using, the different technologies, and going into this coming year, basically 50% of our student population, our new incoming 5th and our new incoming 9th, will get new devices, and our next year 6th grade and 10th grade will keep their devices. So really half of our district, grades 5 through 12, will have a district-issued device. And we were strategic in doing that because we wanted to not have the cost be borne by the local operating budget. And we wanted to really be utilizing the school choice funds. And the way to make that sustainable was doing a 4-year lease on products and basically rolling over 25% of your purchase or your lease each year. We can sustain that in the long term. We really couldn't sustain doing it all at once. So that's why we've had to break this down over 4 years. But I think it's significant to say half of the district is going to have that 5 to 12 next year. Then we'll be at 3/4, and then the year after we'll actually be at 100% of our students and staff, grades 5 to 12, having those devices, which will help us as we go any kind of remote learning in the future. I think that's significant. In the midst of everything going on, too, and in hindsight, almost, thank God, we really worked, I thought, well with all of our different union groups to settle a bunch of our contracts. And I'm very happy we have these in place. There are a lot of districts right now that are struggling with a lot of budget uncertainty. They don't have contracts settled for either next year or the year after. But we actually settled multi-year contracts with all of our different employee groups. And it was time consuming. There was a lot of effort that went into this from the different administration, school committee members on these different panels. It's not easy work. But we first settled with our professional support personnel contract. Those are our paras and our clerks and secretaries in the schools last August, right before the school year gets started. And those contracts are 3-year contracts that go right through 22. So it's timely for us that our year in 21 is covered. And then even for budget planning purposes, we already know coming out of the gate what our costs are going to be for 22. Last November, we settled with our teachers, which is our largest group. Again, their contract is going to run parallel right to 22. And then This was actually our first contract with our building custodians after they had their initial group when they formed as a union. So that contract got settled in April. Actually, we had started the work over the course of last year, and then that ended right as the pandemic was hitting. But it was great to get those 3 contracts behind us. We had settled with our 4th employee group, the administrators, just prior to the summer, so that was technically settled in 19. But it carries the same term. It goes until 22, so we're in good shape on that front. Again, it seems like a long time ago, but we actually engaged Roger Hatch, a retired school finance administrator from DESE, to do a whole financial review for us of Chapter 70, the different pending legislation at the time. Again, we don't know what's going to happen at this point with the Student Opportunity Act or any of the different pending legislation that was out there, but we wanted to really have an outside set of eyes, take a look at our funding over the years, what are the different elements that impact that funding, so that we'll know that moving forward. Linda and the group with the curriculum department, particularly at the elementary school level, spent a significant amount of time and money.
I was gonna say money, I was like, wow, but, yeah, it's
Well,
lots of money.
it was lots of money on the whole literacy adoption at the elementary level. A lot of teachers were involved in this at the elementary school level, trying out different products, providing input. Anytime you do a major adoption like this, again, for us, it's like every 8 to 10 years or so that we're turning over a product, and you want to make sure you're actually investing in something certainly worthwhile and that's going to be financially feasible. But I want to thank Linda, the coordinators that worked on the literacy adoption. Again, a lot of time going to other districts, coming into our district and trying the different packages. That went well, and we have a new program coming in place for September 1. And I will speak to the number of boxes that is ridiculous
Lots of boxes.
that came into the district. So no shortage of
It looks
cardboard.
worse than it is, it really does. I mean, once you unpack it,
A lot of great materials, though.
it's gonna be beautiful, it's beautiful, I love it.
Next, we had started, and it kind of stalled a little bit during the pandemic, the strategic planning process. At the end of last summer and through the fall, we had some surveys because our strategic plan was coming to an end this year. We wanted to be looking ahead for the next 3 to 5 years. We had some community focus groups. Again, we got some feedback from groups. And as we're putting together our different draft plans going forward for July 1st and on, the pandemic hit, and everything really focused to supporting remote learning, what the last 3 months of the school year were going to look like. So once we can get kind of behind what this upcoming school year is looking like, all of our, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, but all of our working groups are going to get going on what our different learning options for the fall are going to look like. As soon as we get that situated, we're going to refocus on the strategic plan. We, I think, have to keep in mind now, there's another element, because we really weren't thinking about this whole remote learning piece that, could happen again in the future. I mean, it could happen in the fall, but it could really happen at any point in time. And I think that this extended closure period has made us realize that we have to do things a little bit differently. We have to be a little bit more flexible in the future. We may have to account for multiple ways of learning, and there's going to be a whole remote element in our work that has to go forward. So not that I'm not happy we didn't get the plan done, but I think it's another just element, another layer we have to really take into consideration. And that work will get ongoing again this summer once we get a better handle on what the fall is going to look like.
I think we also have that, another piece that we have to consider around taking a look at our curriculum in terms of the diversity and whatnot, given recent events. I think that I'm also glad that we kind of didn't finish up the strategic plan so that we can incorporate some of the elements around the feedback that we've received concerning those particular issues, as we move forward. So, it was a fortuitous kind of situation, to allow us to be able to.
Yeah, I mean, even when we have a plan, it's always something that you can go in and amend, and you can, if there's a new, again, the remote learning, we didn't think we were going to be in this situation, but if that's an element we have to go and put back into the plan or revise, it's a working kind of living document.
Right.
But this is going to kind of provide us a little bit of an opportunity to just relook at things that we're doing and then and put it together. We do need to have a start and an end date, so I do see us wrapping this up, probably earlier in the fall, right as the school year gets going. But the work will be running kind of parallel this summer with all the different planning that's taking place for the start of the school year and kind of setting out this course. I do wonder if, again, not for us, I'm not overly concerned, but there are several districts that had just done, say, 10-year plans. And I really do wonder if a 10-year plan is just too lengthy at this point in time because of the way things change. So you might now see districts kind of shifting back closer to like, more manageable, the 3 to 5 year cycles. So it'll be interesting. It'll be worth, having a conversation, but that work's going to be happening this summer as well.
But you raise a good point, is that it is a living document.
Right.
So, once we've determined what our strategic plan is, it doesn't mean that we're locked into just that.
No.
So I
Right.
think that that's an
It's a
important reminder for
good
people.
roadmap, because again,
Absolutely.
we've tried to be very deliberate in whatever our goals and initiatives for the year are, having them be aligned to our budget document, because you've really got to put your money where your initiatives are. So we've spent a lot of time on that. I wouldn't want to have a goal document or the strategic plan that really is separate from the budget.
Right.
On paper, you say you're going to do one thing, but your budget document really reflects something else. So they have to be married together, and that's why we actually had, the whole funding strategy for the budget be one of our goals that we worked on in the strategic plan, to make sure that there was that meshing. But no, this work will continue, and we'll need to refocus on that as the summer goes on. And then I talked a little bit earlier about, just some of the remote learning and how we, it was kind of thrust upon us in March. I didn't want to forget that. I think, again, staff and families did a wonderful job of stepping up to the plate and really trying to help their students. I'm very proud of that. I think as a district, we asked our schools to really step up their communications with home. As a district, we tried to provide regular messages to families too, to just set some of the context for what was happening. We got very good feedback about that. That's something we'll look to continue as we start to roll out plans for the fall. I think people were used to seeing that, and it was just a good resource for us to have. So I'm actually very happy. It didn't start out the way we thought it was going to, but I thought the school year overall was a successful school year, and looking forward to obviously continuing and taking into consideration now some of those obstacles we had to work around with remote learning, and making sure that we're planning for them in years to come. So that's what I would offer, just as our year in review.
Any comments or questions?
It was quite a year.
Yeah.
It's a busy year.
But I think that, I can't say enough about everybody, from you, Dr. Lang, right down to, throughout the schools and our staff in terms of how they really stepped up. I think one thing that we didn't include in this was that in order to be able to kind of get things off the ground with the remote learning, we had to go back to the contract process and develop the memorandum of understanding. And it was great. I thought that the teachers came right to the table and that we were able to iron that out very quickly so that there wasn't really much of a delay at all in terms of being able to get things off the ground. But even without those, teachers had already begun the work. So it was really an incredible effort by everybody. And we can say it 100 times, but it won't be enough, because it was, having lived it myself, I can completely appreciate how difficult it really was.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this, but like, no one ever planned for this. This wasn't something you covered in school, and, you weren't really prepared for. You knew the different elements, but I don't think and even just to come on this quickly, over just a matter of weeks. I was talking to a superintendent friend today, and, we were at a conference in February, and we just kind of first heard the word COVID. We came back, and 2 weeks later, all of a sudden districts were closing, and you were making plans for this extended closure. And at first, we didn't know if this was going to be like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I think, there was some concern statewide of, at that point in time, you're going to close for the whole school year, or you were going to keep some hope that, you'd be back to in-person learning, because there really is no replacement for the in-person learning. And I think everyone acknowledges that. But it's just under these particular trying circumstances, it just wasn't possible. So that's when people really did. I think they stepped up well to try to make the very best of it.
I have to, obviously agree with Donna, and everybody did obviously put on their hats and pulled up their boots and did what they needed to do, which is great. And even before that, I know that's been the focus, but there was a lot of work getting done even before that. And I kind of, just to my own self-satisfaction, went back and looked at the mid-year review and how many things we had gotten accomplished by the mid-year. And, we'd gotten a lot of things done, and I think that would, a lot of that would have been on this report you know, at this
Right.
point, but, you know, this whole situation kind of took over. But, you know, in addition to really responding to the whole pandemic, you know, you know, your staff and all the staff really were working on a lot of different initiatives this year, so.
I just wanted to say thank you for the flexibility. So, you know, in my parent group and with my kids, there were changes that had to be made, and it was good to have you guys listen and kind of take that feedback and make improvements to the day-to-day education, because it was pretty rough there for a minute. And again, nobody knew this was coming. It was kind of unprecedented. So I think everybody's expectations were, we'll just do the best we can. But making improvements and adjustments was smart, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say for the faculty and staff, I taught one class at a community college with 14 students. It was as hard as I've ever worked, so I can't imagine teachers having full schedules and having to do labs and
Lots of
everything
fun.
else.
It's
And
lots
then
of fun.
parents involved, because I had college students who pretty much handled it on their own. Just an incredible community effort. And you're right, all of us, if you taught, you want to be in the classroom with the students, because that's, you know, the most important thing. But the connections that teachers made, it was all things, I think we'll look back and be pretty amazed at how well it was handled and how well it was done.
Yeah. I think we as a district did quite well. You did some very good work. I think a lot of things leading up to it had gotten us into a place where we could do that. Very true. I even think back to the time when I was in elementary level, which is like 5 years ago, and PTO saying, okay, we need to get these pieces of technology so that teachers can learn how to use them and get it going in the classroom, and then continuing forward along the years coming before and saying, let's get the technology going. And you standing behind it and getting the technology going was extremely important. The contracts, the teachers, the food services, the cleaning folks, everybody really stepped up, which is really terrific. For me personally, I've been on a board before of a financial institution, and I think back to when the whole thing collapsed and was going under, and all our agencies were just not working. And we were just talking about strategic planning. We went from 5-year strategic planning to 3-year to down to 1 year at a time strategic planning, because things kept on changing. We're kind of in that in education in a way, and I think we're going to take a lot out of this remote learning, and I think it will even make us better as a district going forward, because I think we're going to see that there are many things that were great in this that can be adapted to the regular teaching every day, and there are things about this that we never want to see again, which we probably don't want to adopt every single day, but there are some very good things. I am also glad that you were willing to and did step up and did surveying and got input from the various members and the stakeholders in the community, and that's extremely important. In addition to that, we then got Black Lives Matter, all of this social justice came to the front and center of what's going on in the community. I think so far we've handled that well. We need to do more. I'm sure that's coming up as we move forward, but that's always going to be moving. That's always going to be shifting. It's taken us over 200 years to get to this point. It's hopefully will take a lot less to going forward. But again, the flexibility is there. The willingness to listen is there, and that is extremely important. So I have appreciated that. I want you to know that. And I think as a district, we've been doing what we need to do, and I think we'll be able to continue doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing you said, okay. One thing you mentioned, Marie, was the something about the staff and using the technology, because now they've had it, they've had to get used to it. I think even staff members who didn't use a lot of technology previously in their classrooms, they might not have had a Google Classroom, now actually see the benefits of it, even just from an organizational standpoint and being able to share communications with students. So not that anyone wanted this pandemic, but I think it actually is probably going to change some teachers' approaches on a positive basis, going forward, to figure out how they don't have to fully move to an integrated platform, or a remote platform, but that they can integrate some of the work that they were doing that really worked well on the electronic side in their regular instruction going forward. And I think that's probably one of the benefits that we're going to see out of this, because you almost had to. You were thrown into that situation where you had to utilize it.
To your comment on that, I heard at a PTO meeting, I heard a teacher who had not used the technology before say, you know what, I suddenly discovered that at 7:30 at night, I might be able to hold an extra session and help my students at that hour, because I can use a Zoom meeting instead of trying to get everybody to stay after school for 15 or 30 minutes. So there's a lot more flexibility that's added in. I think we've always known that in the business world in many ways, and this now is coming to the educational world, which is super to see.
I agree.
Okay, any other comments? All right, this will segue right into the superintendent evaluation process.
Yes, so, thank you. This is
That wasn't it.
No?
So, the same memo as the previous meeting. This is just the timeline we had adopted the last meeting. So what I will do tomorrow is email you out the forms that you typically use, and then I'll email that out to you with this little reminder. And you go through the different forms and you provide your ratings. No P minuses. You provide your ratings on the forms. And then if you can, just send them back to Dennis and I in 2 weeks, on Wednesday, the 21st. We'll combine them, and then we'll put that on as an agenda item at the next meeting.
My question was, is the P plus, P minus a thing? Are we doing pluses and minuses this year? Because we didn't have those, and then they came.
Think out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, as an official rating, the minuses and pluses aren't ratings.
But obviously, it's remembered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I generate P minuses all the time. P minus.
So just, if you look at the documents themselves, they lay out the scoring rubric.
So they would just take the P.
Yeah,
But if
there's
somebody
only
wanted to
one-
add
Right,
color,
I
right?
think it came out of like,
No, I know.
4 people did, 2 people said this, 2 people said that, kind of like, all right, what do you rate that?
Yeah.
But
So the
that-
plus
that's
won't
fine.
count for it, but we can give you a plus to say you've done an extra proficient job on it.
Give them an example.
If that makes you feel good, John.
Just clarifying it for the group, because last time, some people did it one way and some people did it the other, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, by DESI regulations, there are no pluses and minuses. It's just the 4 rankings, but it's all spelled out in the chart. And as I offered up too, if you'd like to sit down over the next couple of weeks, review any individual data, if there's additional stuff that you need to help in your review process, please let me know. I'm happy to provide it. I usually do that summary to just give you a general flavor of what happened for the year. As Dennis indicated, there was a lot more that we actually did and got accomplished before the closure hit in March. But this is just kind of some of the high-level stuff, and this is the high-level stuff that we'll typically share in the annual town meeting booklet that gets printed for the fall. So these would be like the highlight stories that go in that booklet. But I'll get all the forms out to you tomorrow. Like I said, happy to meet if you'd like to. This actually worked out well because our next school committee meeting is a week off, so we don't meet again until the 28th. So you actually have an extra week to conclude this. So that'd be great.
Yeah, and just if you have problems with the form, the chart,
you don't have to use it.
the Excel chart seemed to work. If you're trying to do the comments and the formatting, you can just send me a Word file, say comments and just attach a Word file. Because I know I've had that issue before where the box is only so big and then, and it knocks the chart off on the next page. So
Yeah,
if you have
it's-
issues with that.
It's set up as an Excel form just because the rankings and the boxes work, but when you're typing the narrative in Excel, it doesn't really work well. So if you just email it as a Word document to Dennis, that's fine.
That's easy.
We can cut it all together.
Jeff, this will be your first experience.
Plus, you're a little
Just so you
hooked
don't
on
get
Excel.
frustrated. 'cause
Yeah.
it
That's what?
happens.
Plus, you really are a little hooked on Excel.
Yeah.
I am a numbers guy. I like my
I like
Excel.
Excel too, so.
Yeah.
But no, the chart works all right, though.
Okay, I did get a couple of questions on the superintendent review. So one of the questions is, where can people find the summary of the review from last year? And I went back to try to see if we did put that summary up.
It's on the website.
Is it on the website? Okay, so if you can just say where it is, then people can go look it up. Somebody asked me for that. I could not find it in the meeting minutes.
would definitely be in the meeting
It's
minutes.
in the-
It'd definitely be in the, yeah.
Yeah, it'd have to be in the
It'd
meeting.
have
But
to be in the
it's a
minutes.
link on the website.
I was gonna say, I think it's a link.
It's on a link on the website? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely in the meeting minutes, but I'm going right now. It's one of the reports on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go under district, and then
Okay.
you pick Superintendent Lang, on my own little tab, on the right side of the screen, there are all the different documents. So you see like my goals, my evaluation, my year in review. It's all up on my website.
All right. So
Are we
they can go
obligated to
there.
do that anyway, to make it
What?
available to the public?
It's a public.
A
Well,
public
the
document?
summary document.
Yes.
The
Yes, the summary
summary,
document.
right.
Most districts don't actually put it on the website. I don't mind, because it's a public document, but I've just always linked them, and the whole history is there. So you can go back over the last 4 years.
Okay, so there's the answer. Thank you.
All right, any other questions on the evaluation process? And, yeah, if you need any more information, please reach
Just
out.
reach out.
And ask any more evidence. I'm sure Jay will provide that, so.
Yeah, whatever you need, just call. Like I said, if you want to meet, we're happy to meet. If not, shoot me an email. I'll get you whatever you need.
Okay.
All right, moving on then. Item 4, recommended 2020 budget transfers.
Yep, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Joanna, would you mind walking us through this document? These are just still some initial transfers and recommendations as we close fiscal '20, before we get into next year, fiscal '21.
Thank you. Just a couple items tonight, and Dr. Lang said a little more, a lot more information at the next meeting as we close out the fiscal year. The circuit breaker account is one of the items we just wanted to highlight, and we've been talking about this all year. The quarterly payments come in, and sometimes that fourth quarter payment, you don't know if it's gonna hit in the end of June or July. And this year, it hit in June. So actually, it's 5 payments this year. And that means that when we've been watching this balance, we can only carry so much in that fund. And that balance is that $3,014,000. So because that was a fixed number, we knew that we could carry. We've already made the journal entry to offset the special ed tuitions from the local budget over to the circuit breaker fund, because we knew we knew the number. There was no doubt. And we actually also reached out to the auditors to make sure we had the number right of how much we could carry. So that, just wanted to update you on that information now, rather than wait till end of July. Last meeting, you had approved, or 2 meetings ago, the prepaid tuitions of 1.1, up to 1.1 million. We're asking tonight to increase that number to 1.3 million, because again, we know what's, we know better today what's happened than we did a month and a half ago. And in talking to Amy Reese and talking to the providers, we do have that amount of 3 months' worth of tuitions for our students. So she had gone ahead and gathered all the invoices anyway, just in case. And so we're asking you tonight to increase that. Did you want me to pause and talk about it a little bit and take the motion, or do you want me to, might be a good?
Yeah, why don't we pause and talk about the first 2 things, the circuit breaker and this, and then we can do the other ones. So any questions on the circuit breaker part, first of all? Because we took, I guess, a little bit more, did we not have to take the offset to, what were the other 2 offsets to?
That's right, we did not need to take the offset to school choice.
School choices, right, yeah.
Yep, and,
The other one was Valley, did we?
right, and then the, good memory, the Valley credit came in greater
Okay.
than the budget.
Okay, so did that get applied to?
That was just like a favorable, we just had more money.
Okay.
Because we had a bigger credit.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, other questions on circuit breaker? Okay, questions on the prepaid tuitions part? So basically upping it by 200,000 from our original 1.1.
That's
And
right.
that's all coming from transportation still? So was that,
Yes, that's my
Okay.
recommendation. We could pick other categories, because there are favorable variances. It was just in what we did before, it was just kind of an easy
we
one
have
for
that
one.
much in the transfer?
It's actually a little more, it's like 214 or something, yep.
Sorry.
Any other questions on the prepaid?
Can we just go over transportation? Because it has been a concern. I know that we ended up talking about it at town meeting a little bit at the end,
I think we have that as an agenda item,
so never mind.
right?
Executive session.
Okay, an executive session we have.
Then I'll defer till next
Okay.
meeting. Talk about it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the prepaid tuitions? Okay, so why don't we take a motion on that particular item?
I recommend the school committee vote to approve an FY 2020 local operating budget transfer up to $1,300,000 from the transportation category to the prepaid tuitions account.
Second, okay.
Sorry, I forgot.
Okay,
Sorry.
any questions? So does this motion, and if we pass it, then kind of override the previous one with the 1.1? Is that how?
Yeah, you're basically increasing the cap
Okay,
to 1.3.
okay, all right. So just so everybody, we're not doing another 1.3 million, we're just doing another 200,000 essentially. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions or? Okay, we'll take a vote. Maria?
A.
John?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Donna?
We got you.
Aye.
Aye. I assume A
It's
was
been a
aye,
while.
so- Okay, 5-0, motion passes. Okay, continuing on.
Okay.
Yes, sing. You want me to say other languages now?
And then the last paragraph there, before we get to food service, is just briefing you that we're recommending that if we still have funds available in fiscal '20, if we're favorable in other categories, that would be an opportunity for us to provide, to build some reserve in our revolving funds that can build, that don't have a cap. And so we will bring that summary to you at the next meeting too.
Any questions on that?
Makes sense.
The next section is the food service balances where if a student wasn't able to pay for a breakfast or a lunch, we still serve the student the meal. And then we ask each year this vote for the uncollectibles. This year, it's $6,880.95 to be funded from the local budget because, as a reminder, the revolving fund is, your revenue comes from federal sources, and those free and reduced students cannot subsidize a paid student. So that's why every year we come to you, and if we do have any uncollectibles, the general fund has to fund that. So again, this year it's $6,880.95, which is a significant decrease from prior years. It is true that we weren't in school all 180 days, but it's
Joanne,
improvement.
could I just ask, is that the answer why we can't take it directly from that 700 and whatever
Yes.
thousand that's excess? Okay, because somebody asked me that.
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
why.
Other questions on this? My question is, so the 6,000 is this year, but then there's a total of 62,391 from year after year. From an accounting perspective, how do you just how does it just carry over?
Here's the I mean, it's not real money.
Yeah.
So it's basically, it's debt
Yeah.
that's carrying over from year to year. So we have talked about this, and, I mean, technically, at the end of this year, you would be transferring money in to basically pay that debt, right? So the debt is paid off. We typically still try to, we're not usually successful, but we still try to collect from families that may owe us. So it does happen that people will, make a payment or whatnot, then that just comes off the balance.
Yeah.
But, it's not money, you're just carrying debt year to year, basically. The DOE is concerned about you not subsidizing the cost of that debt through the food service revolving fund. As long as you make the transaction from the local budget, the local budget's paying for that, then you've taken care of your accounting for the money. The question remains, and this could be a conversation for another night, do we want to keep carrying this debt year after year? I mean, part of me says it's not right for someone to not get something that they didn't pay for. In the same respect, there are different reasons why people can't pay for the fee. And like one of them we talked about is, let's say you have a new student to the district who, starts eating breakfast to lunch and accrues a balance because the family can't pay for that. They go through the process, they apply for free reduced lunch. They're ultimately granted, say, free lunch because they meet the threshold. Well, the debt that they accrued before they were approved for the federal reimbursement is still their debt. Now, if they qualified for free and reduced lunch, they probably couldn't afford to pay that debt. But, we technically, that's the most, the easiest one to understand. In that circumstance, we have just always maintained that debt. We try collection, but we know we're going to be unsuccessful. The committee could consider just basically, when you make this transaction, wiping the debt off the books. We would then go into the system and basically negate and wipe out the debt so it's not carrying year to year. But we just haven't done that. We typically have just carried the debt, it stays with the child. We try to collect it. We're typically unsuccessful, but we haven't actually removed it off the sheet.
So when a child goes up to the lunch line, is somebody able to see that child has a $1,276 balance?
It says when they hit
Negative balance?
300, right, that there's already outreach happening, but when they hit
Yeah.
300, the administrators become
The
involved.
person processing, not everyone is knowledgeable of this, the person processing the meal would see that there's a negative balance.
Just see the
But-
negative balance,
But
okay.
we don't deny breakfast or lunch to
Right.
anyone.
But the person does see it, so that's one of my questions. And then the other question I have is, when you look through these pages, there are quite a few that are above $1,000.
Right.
So those folks, whoever those folks are, we have reached out to see if they have applied and so on? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, we can provide them with the material, we can counsel them into filling out the forms and things, but if they don't, there's nothing we can do to force them to. And unfortunately, because we don't deny any students, well, it's actually, I don't want to deny them, but I'm just
Right.
saying, like, if we didn't feed a student, if they weren't able to pay, then that might bring some resolution to this, but we don't do that. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Hey, other questions on
So,
this?
yeah, so I just want to make sure that people understand that, that we are making an effort to make the collections.
Oh, yeah, we make an effort, yeah.
Right. And then, if the balance grows, more formal letters are sent home. And then when the balance is about $300, this is when the administration becomes involved and reaches out to the families to see if there's some other additional support that they may need. Okay. All right.
And in that light, Donna, who reaches out to the family internally here?
So initially, it's Nancy in food service. And then if she needs, each school administration team is offered to help her, whether it be the principal or the assistant principal, now that we have that support. And they have stepped in, because it could be like it could be an indicator of something else going on in the family.
Right.
But it's also very confidential. So that's the process that we've been using to try to help the family.
The reason I ask that is because I think that when I think about confidentiality, I think a lot about the guidance counselor would be somebody who would have to, are there rules about confidentiality when you're talking about things like that, social services or any kind of service like that? And I think maybe that would be important, that somebody in that type of position be the one contacting the family. I love Nancy, but Nancy is the head of food service and not really directly in touch with that student or that family very often in the process of the student's life here. So just a recommendation on that. And if it can become any other kind of barrier, then somebody like a counselor is gonna know who to reach out immediately to refer the family. Just a thought. But, you know, the other thing about actually knowing the balance, I'm sure we don't have food services folks who are prejudicial about that balance or whatever and have been told what the process is. But the fact that a number is associated with a balance and they know who the number is, I think is, you know.
Just one question. Does the person at the checkout actually see the total? Do they just see that there's a negative balance, or do they actually see the dollar amount?
I'll have to take a peek. I'm trying to picture the screen now, you know, and it
Yeah.
has all the little squares, and I know the student's name comes up, and I'm not exactly sure if the number is right below or just like a positive or not.
Right.
Yeah.
I would
If Neil-
just have to find that out, because,
Yeah.
again, then you're dealing with a lot of different people who have access to
Yes.
that.
Right.
It may just be that they see that there's a negative balance. I don't know that they might see what the amount is.
Yeah.
Nancy,
Okay.
behind the scenes, can obviously see managing the program, and she is very good about, like, working with
Oh,
the building
absolutely.
principals, and I know they have included, like, the school counselors, if there's a situation in the home that might necessitate something.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I don't think that the issue around the negative balance would be the sole indicator. There's probably other things
Right,
going
right.
on
Right.
that,
Right.
you know, the staff has picked up on that would necessitate, you know, outreach from somebody in the school.
Right.
So what you know, there's a couple of things. I actually am in favor of wiping out the balances. I mean, I think we can try to collect, but if it hasn't proven to be successful, then I don't see any point in continuing to do it. But I do think from an accountability, you know, perspective to the taxpayers and the general public, you know, in terms of understanding how much it is that we are absorbing, I do think that that's important that we point that out, because over the last, since 4 years, I mean, we're,
Yeah, if you look at the
What?
last page of the report,
oh, I'm sorry,
it
yes,
lists-
thank you, what is it?
it listed out for you by year,
Yeah,
69,000 in
Right.
total.
it's substantial.
You know, that is, I mean, that could be a,
Go ahead.
Just the other thing that isn't on here, just to keep the big picture in mind, is while this is a lot of money, as a percentage of revenue, it's very, very, very small.
Right.
So for the families who are able to pay, or just haven't applied for free and reduced, whatever their situation is, you know, that money is ballparking here. You know, the total revenue for a year is about $1 million from all funding sources. People who pay, it's about, you know, 600,000. So this is a pretty low number,
especially this year.
right, for, big picture wise,
Right.
as a percentage of uncollectibles. It still is a lot of money,
Right.
you know, for the local budget to fund over the years.
Right.
But just wanted to point that out.
And that's the only reason I think that I want to make sure that people are aware, is because, you know, it is. I mean, that 69,000 is a year's salary for a teacher.
Right.
You know, so, you know, I don't think we can, you know, I don't think we can ignore the fact that it is a substantial amount of money, but I just don't see the benefit of carrying the debt over from year to year, you know?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend we take an action tonight, because I'd want to, like, be thoughtful about whatever the motion would be. Because the other thing that we are capturing is, it's a snapshot in time as of, say, the last day of school with regard to what the balance is. So
Right.
even when you go through this list, you're going to see a bunch that are like, you know, I'm looking at a page here, $1.70, $2.25. It's just because people's regular payments might not have caught up. It's not a matter that they can't necessarily pay, it's just a processing date. So I don't know that you would necessarily want to, like, wipe those away, because that would be a disincentive for anyone to just pay the regular as they go. But maybe we took a look at, like, a particular dollar amount. You know, when something grows to a particular dollar amount, we look at those as a way to then.
Like a
even-
cap?
Well, no, but like we would, I mean, ballpark, let's just say it was $500.
Yep.
You know, we take anyone who has accrued that much of a balance, take a look at the circumstance, you know, make sure, you know, and probably a lot of it is they qualify. There was just that gap between when they qualified and when they started getting it. And maybe we just actually, you know, vote to remove those.
Right, okay, yeah, that
But
makes sense.
if we can just have a little time to kind of think about, like, a
Yes.
thoughtful way of going about it, because I just don't want to disincentivize the good people that are paying to
I
have them
agree.
continue to
I
do
agree.
that.
And
That's
I also
unfair.
don't want to just crush, have that one more thing hanging over families that can't, so.
The amazing thing is if you look between fiscal 19 and current, it's a huge difference. 21,000 to 6,000. I can't just spend those last few months.
No,
So,
Well, we lost a third of the school year, basically.
it's a substantial difference.
Yeah, I don't know, was the trend, did you notice anything different with the trend this year?
Yeah, I think people are trying to pay. I think people are feeling more comfortable applying for
Okay.
the services. I think the outreach from the schools to the families, we get better each year, so.
That's terrific, if that's an indicator, because that is a very substantial difference. It kept on going up, and it's now suddenly much less.
Yeah.
So
And
that means that, people are working at it.
the other thing, participation did not decline. Like, if you look at the, when we were here, it didn't go down because meals served for the first, 2/3 of the year went down. So that's another layer of this too.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, I'll take a motion to,
I recommend the school committee vote to approve an expenditure transfer of $6,880.95 from the food service revolving fund to the FY '20 local operating budget.
Second.
okay, any further comments, questions? Did you have something?
No, it's okay.
All right, anybody else? Okay, we'll vote. Maria?
Yes,
John?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. You use a different one every time? Yes, we.
oh, it's
see.
Y. It just begins with a Y.
Okay. All right, I think that's it, right, on the budget stuff?
Yeah, that's it for the update, and we'll hopefully have final numbers for you on the 28th, just depending on how the close goes, but each week we're inching closer.
Next item is interface report.
Sure, this is item number 5 on the agenda this evening, and this is just every 6 months or so, we receive a report from Interface, which is the service that provides mental health and counseling services to our families and staff and students that might be in need. And I thought what was interesting, Sue Rosa from the Health Department sends this over to us. But, of our individuals, well, two things that were significant to me. When she talked about the different referrals that other communities were, they actually saw a decline given COVID-19, but we actually had an increase in service referrals, so I think that's significant. It certainly shows that we have a need in the community, but also that our staff and families and students have taken advantage of the service, so I think it's very worthwhile as a service. And that anxiety and depression continue to be the two kind of top criteria or elements where people are seeking services. So those two things really jumped out to me on this particular report. And this is funded between the Board of Health, Town of Chelmsford, and the School Department, the three of us, kind of tri-fund this particular agreement. It's open to any resident in Chelmsford. We obviously utilize it as a service through the schools, but it's been a tremendous resource for us, and it's something we obviously want to continue to fund moving forward. I think this is the 9th year that the service has been in place.
I remember when you had that session, I think it was the first public session that I went
At the
to
police
as
department?
a member of this committee, where you mentioned the service, and then placing that link on the sites, I think was very important. And I'm glad that if anything came out of that session that may have actually impacted people,
Right.
that was one thing. It was terrific.
I think the addition of Jen Melanson too probably has helped
She's been a great resource.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's been
in terms
wonderful.
of helping to make the referrals and
And
whatnot.
I mean, our counseling staff really do utilize it as well. Our school psychologists utilize it. We have the new social worker at Barker. They refer families as well, so, no, it has been, it's been a great
Yeah,
service.
it looks like 2/3 of the referrals come from the schools.
Schools, yeah.
So,
That's wonderful.
all right, any other questions on the report? All right, next agenda item are liaison assignments, so no major change really. The only request I got was John asked to be the liaison to Parker. So I did move him into Parker. I think Donna was the liaison originally. And then I took John off of council schools. I took that one on. The only other things I did, I kind of reorganized some of the subcommittees. It ended up that I was on a lot of the negotiating committees. We kind of take a little of the workload off of Al last year. And so those aren't going to meet, I hope, much over the next year. So I kind of evened those out a little bit, and that's why I was able to take John's position there on the council schools. Other than that, I don't think there are any major changes. Are there any things on there people would like to see changed? I didn't get any other requests, so people seem to be comfortable with the different committees they're on. So if this is good, this is what we'll post online, and as we get back into the beginning of next school year, if you can get in contact with the different groups that you're on and just let them know that you're going to be the liaison for the year.
All right, I'll get these posted tomorrow for you.
Awesome. All right, next item is something came out of last meeting. I know that I mentioned that the resolution that we had passed a couple meetings ago, we sent out to various representatives. The only one that got back to us was Congresswoman Trahan on that, which was a little discouraging, a little disappointing. And then subsequently, we sent out a couple other resolutions, one on funding for PPEs and one on equity and promoting equity and diversity in education. And again, we didn't hear back from any of our representatives. And not that we expect them to immediately, make changes that are going to benefit, but at least some sort of recognition that they're working on the problem. So what I did, working with Donna, we put together a letter that we'd like to send to our representative, just letting them know of our frustration, I guess, at this point. And since try to write it from the perspective of the school committee, I thought we should run it by everybody and make sure everybody's comfortable with the letter and the tone of the letter. And if so, then I'll get it sent out tomorrow. If anybody would like to see any changes or anything else added to it, we can do that too. So I don't know if everybody had a chance to read it.
It's a good letter. It especially points out the frustration, and we heard from somebody who has 30-plus towns to represent, and Congresswoman Trahan. And I think it's important, the line about people in town believing, since we're only little pieces of everyone's, of the 4 reps, that we don't get the kind of attention. And that's been an issue in town for the longest time. And I think that's important to point that out.
And, the request at the end, once everything gets back to them, we'd like to sit down with them, have them come to our meeting or have a larger meeting, including the selectmen, and just, discuss Chelmsford, and what we need and, what's going to help Chelmsford out, as opposed to, the other 3 towns that they're representing. So, so if everybody's comfortable with that, yes. Okay, all right, so I'll send it out tomorrow.
Good, nicely done.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Thank you.
I'll put it on letterhead for you if you want.
Sure, that'd be great.
Great.
Okay, all right, next item is parent survey results.
Yes, so I'm going to walk you through a little PowerPoint with some of the survey results. If you recall, at the end of the, nearing the end of the school closure, as we were starting to get ready for our work, hang on one second, I'm just going to get this started. As we're starting to get ready for our work over the course of the summer with regard to going back to school, we really did want to hear from parents about their experience with remote learning. We wanted them to talk to their students as well, to hear about how remote learning went and, what we can do, replicate what went well, and then learn from our mistakes and what didn't go well, and be able to make some changes in practice. So a lot of different districts were putting surveys out to their communities. We adopted a lot of the similar questions so that we could actually compare community to community, and we added a few of our own. But I just want to review these with you this evening. Again, this work will help inform the working groups over the course of the summer. And I think the other significant aspect of this, I don't have this for you this evening. I just closed this, I think, last Friday, so that we could gather this for this meeting. But there were over 2,000 comments, which is remarkable. Again, just feedback-wise from parents, so we're going through the process of coding all of those, just so that the information can be usable for the working groups. So I don't have all the comments for you this evening, but these were the responses to the questions that came in across the system. So in all, we ended up receiving 1,730 total responses, which again, for a survey for us, that's a significant sampling size. We asked parents to identify how many students they actually had in the Chelmsford Public Schools at this point. And so if you actually take the number of students per family, this is data for just shy of 3,000 students. So 2,986 students are included in this reported sample size. So again, that's a significant number for us, and I think we can use this data to really inform our discussions moving forward. We also had a good sampling of data from really all grade levels of the district, from our pre-K CHIPS program all the way up through grade 12. It was pretty proportionate. We didn't see any particular school that was reporting at a higher or lower percentage of their student population. Again, we asked them to just identify which specific school they were at, in addition to what grade level they were at. And so as we review these, we can stop slide to slide if you have questions or concerns or want to make comments. A couple of the things I'll just tell you that kind of jumped out to me as we go through this. This particular first slide really surprised me a bit. It was a question we just wanted to find out, how many adults in the household were actually working remotely during the closure. I was surprised by this. This was a bit higher than I thought. Yeah, it came in 83% of our families were working from home as opposed to going to an office environment during the closure. And I guess in my mind, I just wasn't thinking it was going to be that high. I was still thinking a lot of families were working. But that really actually does kind of inform some of the feedback we received later in the survey around some of the struggles that families had around scheduling and time and multiple users on devices and things along that. But I thought that was actually pretty telling.
Who did you think was watching the kids?
What's that?
I said, who did you think was watching the kids?
Well, Donna, I knew someone was watching the kids. No, I just figured, maybe
Just curious.
more family members would still be like in a traditional work environment. I was just surprised by it.
Well, it would be interesting to compare this to say, let's say a district like Lowell, or Lawrence, or another district where there were a lot of people who were responders and had to go out or were frontline workers. I think our community, this is a reflection of the Chelmsford community and the folks who live here and send their kids to school. As of today, my husband, who's working in technology, hasn't stepped out of the house to go work, and they're not expected to return to a live environment until after December. So I think that this is reflective and is very important to keep in mind as we go forward in what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested when we start to share data from community to community, because this was a common question. Just, how does, Chelmsford rack up, again, Lowell, but even like, say, a Billerica or a Methuen or an Andover, just to kind of get a sense for where they're at. Next question was, my child participates in remote learning activities. How much percentage of the time? About 40% were all the time, 47.1% most of the time. This is pretty significant that, again, kids were participating in the different activities.
This was hard to answer as a parent. That's why those comments are very important, because when I went to answer this for my two children, they're each very different in this response. And so I only could deal with this answer in the comments.
Okay.
And I had several parents along the way who sent me commentary about this question because their children were different.
Yeah, we alluded on this in the previous meeting, but what's difficult when we put out these surveys is we really do want as many parents to participate as we can. And it's counter. So there's some parents that would like to, fill out an individual survey for each student, and then we're gonna lose a lot of parents if they have 4 or 5 students and, they have to fill out a multiple per student. So there's no great way of doing it. The few parents that I talked to that were concerned that their kids really had totally different experiences and they wanted to be able to reflect that, I said, well, if you want to provide 2 different surveys, you can do that for each child, but just in the first question, answer that you have 1 student in the household, so it's not skewing the data, and then answer, 1 student as well instead of 2 for the household, and then fill out a separate one. Most parents don't want to go to that length of time, but if they wanted to, they could. But again, we're going more towards like the masses, and I think that was a good feeling. You get about 90% of the students who are participating in the learning almost all the time, or for at least the majority of the time. My children enjoyed remote learning. So this is where some of the data started to skew. And I have to say across the board, even when I just glanced through the comments, it was pretty consistent that not a lot of people loved remote learning. And I think that's consistent from the staff didn't love it, the parents didn't love it, the students didn't love it. But it was, again, that's what we had to deal with, so what could we actually do? You did actually have a group, about 20% agreed that the kids liked remote learning. 30% were neutral. I will be curious to see, when we break this down by grade level, was this more skewed, perhaps the high school kids, which were a little bit more independent than your elementary school kids are. And again, that's another level of detail we can get to, we just didn't for tonight, to see if at different elementary, elementary different than middle than different to high school. But all in all, people didn't love remote learning, but they made the best of it.
Well, it's also, enjoy remote learning relative to the classroom experience,
Right.
I mean, because when you think about it that way,
Right.
you know.
Well, and that'll kind of
wouldn't
touch on
rather
one of
be in
the
the classroom.
engagement questions,
Right.
because I think people really did just feel a loss of, having the teacher in front of them, having their peers to be able to talk to. The whole social interaction piece, I think, came up a little bit later. The remote learning activities, assignments, and lessons were engaging. Again, most people agreed. You got the number's small, 36% or 37% agreed. A handful of strongly agrees, a lot of neutrals on this one. You probably, families, again, particularly at the elementary grade levels, really had a hard time just managing all the different Google Classrooms that the students were responsible for.
And I think it's important to point out, too, that we had guidelines from DESE that in some ways we exceeded, because I think one of the things that they were suggesting is that we continue to just use material that it was previously covered. And I think in a lot of cases, we went well beyond that.
Right.
So that, that is one thing I wanted, because we did have a set of expectations, but, DESE had theirs too, and I think we exceeded, as I said, that in many areas. The one question I had is, as we were going through this, and I'm so happy that parents provided comments, will we be able to determine like thematic roadblocks, that we can adjust for, going forward? So,
That's the purpose of coding them, just so
Okay.
that we actually can try to find some trends in the data,
Okay.
instead of just looking at, say, one of these questions had 993 comments. So instead of just looking at individual comments, you've got to try to find themes in them, and that's what we're going through now.
okay.
I'm hoping that, you're going to probably find 5 or 6 major elements that are kind of consistent within the comments. Where was I? Expectations of remote learning, the assignments being clear to my family and children. Again, half agreed, 12 and a half strongly agreed, and then you had your number that were either neutral, negated by the strongly agree and the strongly disagree, kind of offset each other there.
I know we had, we obviously had sent out guidelines for staff in terms of what it was, the expectations were. But I still think that there was a great deal of variability, among staff. Are we going to be able to kind of level that out a little bit if we have to do this again, in terms of, like, you have to do this, you have to have Zoom classes, you have to, you know what I'm saying? Because some people did,
Yep.
some people didn't.
I would hope, that's all gonna be the work of the working groups.
Okay.
And then it's a negotiation item too. We've gotta get the, even when we reach that MOA, we worked very well with the union on this. We've still gotta work with them to figure out what are those, expectations gonna be for all staff, so we can then communicate it with the parents, so that they know kind of what they should be expecting from their kids. I think what we also balance, though, is even though we might set out our expectations, parents might have either higher or lower expectations for what they want their kids to do. And we've got to try to figure out through some of the comments, because we might not get it through these, where their kids fell
Yeah.
on this.
But in some families, we saw a great disparity, for the experiences of kids. So, one may have been, really encouraged to be engaged, and there was a lot of interaction with stuff, and others, it may have been more hands-off, more asynchronous learning, kinds of experiences, things like that. And, how do we adjust, so that,
Right.
kids across the district, are getting relatively the same experience, because they do deserve that. They deserve to have, a standard that everyone should be able to meet.
No, I think that's important. I think it's also where we want to have some consistency within grade levels, and certainly even, like, say, within schools in the district. If we're able to start in person, and then, something happens, we have to go remote, we come back, you want to have, because you don't have that contact with the staff even. Like, I know staff struggled with this because they didn't see their peers every day, but you don't want to have, say, fifth grade at even one of the two middle schools, you've got 4 different teams of teachers. You don't want to have them all in the same pacing early on. Then you go remote, they all go do their own thing, and then you come back and you're trying to make up ground. So I think that consistency is going to be important. I think part of the struggle we had is we do have different staff that have different comfort levels with the different technologies that we used. And hopefully over the course of the spring, everyone is a little bit more comfortable. We have some time to, again, provide some PD and training. So hopefully there would be a more across the board playing field for all of our students.
Well, I do think that's important, to be able to provide that professional development.
Yeah.
I mean, I use Google Classroom as a student. I didn't use it much as an instructor, and I could figure it out, but I wasn't efficient. Do you know what I'm saying, in terms of how I was using it? I think there was a lot more that I could have done with it.
Right.
But I just, I was scrambling.
Right.
To try and, to get the remote part of my teaching up and running. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to provide, opportunities for teachers going forward to, kind of expand their skill set in terms of what they can do with Google Classroom and stuff. Because I think there's a lot of room.
Well, that's also happening with or without remote learning. That is part of the offerings this summer. Teachers can also, when they come back, always work either individually or in small groups with their TIS. So the TIS were like integral in this, because they were the ones providing all of that professional development. And over the summer, I had asked for people to put together content-related PD for the different departments, and that is still part of the process.
Oh, great.
So people can even go back, because a lot of people took those classes quickly, right? And they can go back to them as well, because they're self-paced.
Do we have Simply K in Chelmsford?
No.
We
Okay.
what?
It's a place where teachers can go and take webinars and things like that for free.
Never heard of it.
And Google Classroom was one of the more popular ones that was being accessed, so.
Yeah, and we try to keep a lot of our professional development within the realm of like what we know like we can support. That was part of when we were putting this all together. Many teachers wanted to go to different platforms, and we get that, right? You're comfortable,
Right.
you've had an experience with it, but at the end of the day, we as a district have to support that through the technology department, so it's easier to funnel it into what we actually do. Google has come out with many new items too, so even those that are very proficient using the platform, there's many more things coming out. You have Jamboard now, and there's just all these different ways that you can work with students beyond just the basics. So, and they're planning on refining those, because there was some questions around, like even around the Google Meet, is there a hand-raising feature, things like that. So Google is really, upping their game with this to be in alignment with some of those more costly programs.
Well, right, and I think that, Zoom, which was very popular, I don't know how much longer they're going to let that license be free, to school districts, right? So I think we need to be prepared for what's the next step.
Right.
And we also have to house our information too.
Right,
So if
right.
there is a Google Meet, it gets put into this
Right.
server somewhere.
Right.
So if we have to access something, you just don't want them in a many different venues, because then we don't know what's happening. We
Right.
lose control when it goes outside of the district.
I think consistency was one of the comments I got quite a bit about, and being the mother of twins at exactly the same level in high school. I can talk to you about consistency and inconsistencies, but the thing is that the other comment I got a lot of parents who talked to me about was that there was no feedback really from the teacher The student provided work, but there was minimal feedback or opportunities to give feedback on the work. And that would have to be corrected somehow in anything we offer come fall, in my opinion, because you were doing pass-fail. I mean, okay, so it's pass-fail. So essentially, the students who worked hard and had gotten through that third semester and had done well, did well this past year. And that was lesson learned for all students in many ways. But the pass-fail component of it didn't have too much of an incentive in a way for the student. And however, you didn't have to have as much of the teacher feedback. That's what the teacher is, in my opinion, so valuable. And it's wonderful if you can see it, the person face to face. But there would have to be something of that, and that's what a lot of parents talked about. One parent wrote to me about an experience compared to a private school that they had another child at, and in that private school, it was like a live teacher every 45 minutes. You zoomed in to the live meet every 45 minutes, just like you did in your regular schedule.
Right.
And you had to hand in work. You scanned in your work, you sent in your work, and you got feedback. The amount of work that involves is tremendous, especially if you have to go onto the online thing. But just to let you know, those were some of the comments I got on, the effectiveness of the learning and on the consistency comment as well.
Were you gonna say something, Dennis?
Nope.
Oh, okay. In terms of accessibility, I feel my child's teachers were, very accessible was the vast majority, and somewhat accessible, so that was good that we didn't have too many not accessibles. Again, I really do think the teachers tried to go above and beyond to keep the contacts going.
And they were creative, let me tell you.
Yeah, no, they,
Very creative. I saw some of this going on in the art and the music classes that I thought, this is pretty creative here.
yeah, no, they did, they really did a great job. In terms of accessibility, my child's school and district administrators, again, vast majority, very accessible, somewhat accessible, the small group not accessible. Overall, I'm happy with both comment box. So then we had some options where we asked parents to give us some just general feedback as to, the first question we asked them, are there challenges that you or your child experience at home? So these are some of the more significant ones that I grabbed for you. Again, not dissimilar to the first question about how many people were working at home, but 73.8% of the respondents reported that they did have difficulty because of the parent working at home with the kid. Around scheduling, again, the computer access, I think will come out later. So that was really, really telling. Adult household members or essential workers working outside the home. So 35% did have this come into play. This kind of talks about staff that do have to leave the home. And I had received a couple of parent emails around this, that the parents were struggling because they had to leave the home, they were essential. Either whoever was watching the kids at home didn't have the ability or the kind of the capacity to help the students with the remote learning, and that was problematic for them. 31.5% had issue sharing devices, and this actually, there were some feedback, this wasn't even just among parent and student, but among multiple siblings and families. So we received some information on that. 21.9% had just general internet issues. I think a lot of the feedback just through the typed responses had to do with like connectivity issues. If you're on a Google Meet and it drops, if you're trying to do a demonstration at a school committee meeting and the person cuts out. So there were those kind of issues that come up. And then we had about 7.8% struggling because they had family members that were sick and they were caring for. At the same time, they were trying to work and also help their students with remote learning. So there was a lot on parents' plates. My child felt connected to school through remote learning. Again, you had a small percent that strongly agreed. About a quarter of respondents agreed in general, and another quarter of respondents were neutral. So it was really kind of a mixed bag with regard to this one. And this is something that we heard through the comments, that, people just didn't feel that human connection as much as people tried, even if it was a remote screen. You felt like you didn't have that, the kind of the human touch with things. Was your child comfortable asking questions of the teacher if something came up that they didn't understand? Again, majority agreed or somewhat agreed. A handful said no, and a handful also just didn't know on that particular question. Then we got into a little bit about, what were your biggest challenges or concerns with remote learning? And again, this is something that we want to take into consideration when we're talking about remote learning in the future. And again, these were the top 5 that jumped out to me. But 71% reported that children feeling the social isolation from remote learning, that was significant. Motivating their children to do work. I do wonder on that one too, and we'll have to get into the comments, if some of it had to do with the pass-fail and that it wasn't a graded subject. We'll have to look into that. Students and parents really desired live instruction by teachers, and they really felt that was the most helpful when the teachers were doing Google Meets and actually doing lessons with their kids. Another concern, again, juggling remote learning while trying to work from home. And about half of the people were also just concerned with the amount of screen time they were having. There's not a lot of, other things you can do when you're in a remote environment. And we did actually try to incorporate, even when some of the specials and things, some just project-based work at the elementary level on the Wednesdays, so it wasn't really a screen time Wednesday. We tried to make some modifications as you go, but inherently in remote learning, there is going to be a lot of screen time involved. The remote learning strategies that work best for their children, as reported by parents, again, the live video instruction, over half. This is a constant, continuous theme that the teachers that really had a set daily schedule worked really well for their kids. And that's something that we're going to look at district-wide, even beyond just teacher to teacher, but like at different schools. Do we just actually try to have there be a traditional schedule, even if it's off the regular time, but have a particular class that meets at a particular time, and just to maintain a schedule through the day. That I think would go well. Online learning websites, pre-recorded lessons, and then self-paced long-term assignments was the 6th top answer. People really seem to crave just the online interpersonal, the live instruction or the live meets with the teacher in front of them. And that was something that we'll bring to the groups. Planning for September. So we wanted to know if all of the different health and safety regs were in place in the district. Do you intend to send your child back to school in the fall? Again, I was a little surprised by this one. About 91% said yes, their kids are coming back to school, but about 9% said no, they didn't plan on sending their kids back to school. So for us, 10% of a 5,000 student population is 500 kids. We have to, and this is a concern among all school systems in the area, if we do go back to in-person, what a remote option look like for those kids and families who, for whatever reason, can't come back? Are there going to be reasons why parents can opt into remote as opposed to just because I want to? Are there medical reasons and things like this? So this is something that the districts are working on. And then lastly, we were kind of curious about this, is for the students who actually, because this is going to be a big issue for us, transportation, for the students who typically ride the school bus to school in the fall, how many intend to actually do that? And so we had about a third of respondents of kids who would typically ride the school bus indicate that they won't be riding the school bus. So this may help us in some way kind of balance the school bus load a bit, but I thought this was pretty telling. One of the 2 big areas that the Department of Ed has not issued any guidance on at this point in time is student transportation. So the whole school busing is a concern. On a call earlier today I was on, there was a district that was working with the initial guidance document that came from either DESE or one of the health organizations, and they were looking at possibly being able to fit 24 students on a 77-passenger bus to meet all the different space requirements. That's just not going to be feasible. We don't have the capacity to add, another 2 times the number of buses that we have to do that. It would be cost prohibitive, but even if you had the money to pay for it, there's not that kind of buses out on the street. So this is going to be a huge issue, not only for us, but for all districts. And I'm feeling like we're not going to get definitive guidance from the state on this one until the end of July at the earliest, because this is something that they're just still wrestling with regard to what to do.
It's gonna be a problem for the transportation companies, too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, how can they add that many buses to their
Well, they
fleet?
can't. I mean, the transportation companies are locked into whatever fleet they have. It's basically going to put the burden on the districts to figure out, here's your limited fleet, what do you want to do with them? So that's a huge challenge, you know, we're working on it, but that is one that concerns, I'll tell you right now, every school district in the area.
I did receive a question on this from a parent who wanted to know if they register and they pay for it, are they assured that they get a seat on the bus? So what I said, I have not, I'll be honest, and I have not responded to that email. It came in about 3 days ago. Because I think our discussion at this committee level was that we don't know.
Right.
So that will be the answer that I have to give, I believe. But I also did see this 33%, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure out if we're gonna come up with a plan that brings everybody back to school every single day. Because some of the districts that have already come up with plans in other states, I haven't seen Massachusetts. If somebody else has, that's
We don't
good,
have a
I
plan
have
yet,
not
no.
seen it. But in other states, I've seen things like, it's 2 weeks remote and 1 week there in order to take advantage of the 14-day type of quarantine thing on the virus. And keeping the kids together, basically, in certain groups. And they alternate on those weeks, different groups. So it may be that if that's the kind of plan that we come up with, then you're not gonna have a busing problem. So, it really depends on what the plan is in order to get
Right.
a direct answer on that. I will reply accordingly, exactly that way. But I think
it's going to be
that's-
very difficult to guarantee anything until we know which, what our
Exactly.
3 options are going to be. And it may even be subsets of the 3 major plans. And then what kind of guidance we're going to get from the state at that point in time.
So one of my concerns is basically, this rippling effect. So let's say we have to limit the amount of transportation that we can provide, and parents have to go to work. Well, they may be looking, for example, to send their kids to extended day, and I don't even know if we're gonna have that.
Right.
And if we do have it, then we're gonna have to limit the number of kids that we can have in extended day because of all of the other regulations that are in place. And so, I can completely appreciate parents' stress and anxiety around
Right.
wondering how to plan for the fall because there's so many variables that have to be taken into account. But, I am very worried, that if parents are going to have to transport their kids because the regulations are so strict, how do they do this and manage other children at home or, their own jobs and things like that, so.
Right. I share your concerns. I don't.
I know.
A lot up in the
But,
air.
I
A lot
know,
up in the
I
air.
know. And then Maria, I did respond to that email.
Yeah,
and-
I had another one too, though.
Okay, and I can talk to you about, I did a follow-up that I can update you
Okay.
on that, so.
But I have another one. So I think that, I read an article today about working parents that, in the New York Times, that really hit home, that the working parent is losing in many ways. If you have, and you're trying to keep your budget stable, and you're a working parent, and you don't have, riches galore, where you can just bring somebody on who's just gonna take care of the kids while you remote work. It's just an impossibility. And of course, parents don't wanna be out there saying, I just work anything to get my kids out to school because I really can't handle this. And the woman was talking about working until 2 a.m. in order to be able to cover her work in addition to helping the children.
Right.
And in the end, both had to become work-at-home parents, and it got worse and worse. So some of these issues that are reflected in this survey
Right.
But the concept, the idea that we have a community where we have quite a few parents who need to work and must work in order to keep their family stability, is something that we have to take under consideration, in my opinion, so.
Yeah, and on the flip side, I think we have to take into consideration, you know, what it's gonna feel like for a teacher having to go back.
Absolutely.
You know, in terms of,
Yep.
you know, the social distancing and the whole hygiene piece, which is, you know, daunting with elementary, middle, and high school kids.
Special
So,
populations too.
Yeah, you're right, and your special populations. So, you know, I mean, there's you know, I don't want to, you know, I know that obviously this is the parent survey, but I think we also have to be mindful of the fact that, you know, we have our own staff members who are in high-risk categories for one reason or another, and this is going to be overwhelming.
Yes.
think-
The article ended with that,
Yeah.
saying that the teacher who's part of that working family is the worst of all situations,
Right.
is that teacher.
So I think this segues well into the next thing, is what is our return to school planning going on right now to deal with some of these issues?
Yeah, we don't have, I mean, I'll be the first to say this, we don't have definitive plans for the fall yet. I think every single school district in the state is struggling with this. The Department of Ed just released their preliminary, guidance document a week ago Friday. So we spent last week really going through that, trying to figure out exactly what the ask from them was. And then we have a clarifying call with the commissioner on Thursday of this week, because we have the document, but now we actually have some questions for him about how to implement different aspects of it. But as you read the initial guidance, what the Department of Ed is looking for at this point is for districts to come up with three plans. The first option would be, and this is the preference, to go back to full in-person school in the fall. So that, would be the state's kind of priority and direction for learning in the fall. Now, one of the questions that I have is, embedded within one of the documents, there's a little statement that says, even if you implement the full in-person schooling, you need to provide a remote option for students who can't participate in person. That's where it becomes, iffy. Is it because of, say, a medical reason? Is it like going to be a small subset of the population that can't go back? Or are people just able to, say, opt into something like that? What does that do to us operationally if it's just a total opt-in? And, they start remote, and then they decide all of a sudden, no, they want to actually come back to in-person. Either things are better for them, or they had a change of heart and they want to do that. We're going to have a very difficult time ramping up for a reopening in August. And then 2 or 3 weeks in, if we have again, we're not talking just a couple of kids, but if we had 50 or 100 or 200 kids that all of a sudden decide now they want to come back, that's going to affect everything operationally within the buildings. It starts with how they get to school. So if they haven't signed up for transportation, and we configure and adjust to whatever routes we can manage, then to put that kind of a strain on the system is going to be difficult. Go ahead.
No, when you're finished, I have a question from a parent.
Going into like even just operationally within buildings, we're trying to figure out, again, they want to keep cohorts of students together as much as possible. What's that going to look like at the elementary level? It's probably more doable than when you get to the middle school level and the teachers start to specialize a little bit more. It's certainly more difficult at the high school level when you have true specialization. You don't have one teacher teaching all 4 grade levels of kids like you do
No, I'm
Oh,
listening.
okay.
I'm
Like
listening
you do.
intently.
All right, well, you caught me there. Like you do at the elementary level. So these are like different things that we are working on. Hopefully we get more out of the call on Thursday. My gut tells me that we'll receive the next round of guidance from the department, probably at the end of July, and that might include information with regard to what transportation guidance is gonna look like, what operational guidance around, say, food services, things like that are gonna look like. But again, I know we're getting late. In early August, I'm anticipating that we're gonna receive kind of the final guidance document from the state. And at this point in time, the commissioner is still indicating that, about 80% of the decision with regard to what we're gonna do in the fall is gonna come from the Department of Ed and the state. That it's not going to be a local decision about whether you go back to school or you don't go back to school. So how this all plays out, politically and practically, because you do have different school systems that even question came up today about, schools within school systems. What if you have a particular school that has enough space and capacity to have full in-person learning, but you have another school down the street that doesn't? Can you have an in-person model in one school in your district and a remote model in another? There's all these different questions. So as all of this is being worked out, I did email the staff over this past weekend to talk about our final kind of working groups to look at all these different areas. So we're going to have 5 major areas. Under teaching and learning, we're going to have groups that look at the remote options, the hybrid options, the in-person options. There's a group on facilities and operations. So that's going to be your cleaning and sanitation and food services and transportation, that whole group. That's also going to have, say, health services. Peggy Gump's group and the nurses have to weigh in on how they're going to actually implement a lot of the different recommendations that come along. So we're going to have these different groups that, we're having a district level, what's that?
Activities.
That would fall more on, it's not a separate group. So like,
Okay.
as a topic, that can be addressed in one of the groups. But we're going to have
Special populations in there too. That's a subgroup.
Special populations is a
Yeah.
separate group, so that would be,
Okay.
your special education, your ELL students.
What's your
Yeah,
other one?
that's a separate one.
So
Facilities,
teaching,
instructions,
operations, health
operations,
services,
SEL.
special
Operations
population.
of business.
No, facilities and operations, communications.
Okay,
The 5th group is communications, to really talk about, number one, when we have our plans done, not only for the launch for the start of the school year, but we're gonna have to be able to, they're saying shift on a dime. So if you go back in person, you end up going remote, vice versa or whatnot. How are you gonna keep the communications going within your community, within your schools, to make it as fluid as possible? So we actually wanna have people focused on that communication. So our district team is convening this week to finalize all the groupings. That work is gonna really begin in earnest next week. We've pulled together all the different state level reports for them. They're gonna have the feedback from the surveys. Our parent email is going out tomorrow to add parents to these various groups. So between tomorrow and probably the weekend, we'll add some parent representatives. I do want to vet at the district level some of the higher level stuff that's really non-negotiable as far as going back to school with the district level team first before it goes out to the working groups. But my timeline is basically between next week and about 3 weeks, so the end of July, will be to kind of refine our different options. Again, we're not going to know at that point in time which option we're going with, but we're going to be able to say, these are our options, this is what we're comfortable with. There may be additional feedback we need to get from parents along the way, so there could be another survey. And then basically, I'm thinking administration and school committee, probably the first 2 weeks in August, want to host some either in-person or virtual sessions to really tell the community what our plans are. I am hoping at that point in time, we get some better guidance and we can actually say, this is what we're looking to implement, but minimally be able to say, these are our 3 options, and here's what we're waiting for to figure out what we're gonna do. So that after that second week in August, we basically, hopefully by that point, have the definitive from the state with regard to the health trends and where we're going, and we can lock into a model for the opening of school and then get fully prepared for that. We are also meeting with the union group on Thursday as well, after my call with DOE, to talk about staff concerns and coming back. There are a lot of concerns, even just geographically, in a hybrid scenario. If a lot of this information isn't dictated by the state, we could be in a situation where, we have our staff member who happens to live in another neighboring district, whose kids go to school in that district, but if we don't have a coordinated hybrid model, their kids could be in school on a week that, the teacher is not, and vice versa, and that could really throw things off. So there is a push for some across the state direction on this, just so that there's some continuity, because there are really just so many moving parts. I wish I had more I could tell you. We will be forthcoming as soon as we know what our options are. We are getting the latest and best information. There's just not a lot of it right now, but as soon as we get that, we will be conveying that and passing it along.
Sorry.
John, you had a question? Yeah. So I actually got a text question, and the question was, for the difficulties questions, did you include anything specific for special education? And were there any general special education questions for parents?
What I grabbed for just the responses for this
Yeah.
were just like based purely on the data and the responses,
Okay.
just the top 5 or 6 responses based on percentage. There certainly were other elements that just didn't rise to the top, say, 5 or 6. And a lot of the comments that parents provided within the text field related to special education.
Okay.
So that'll, when we're doing the coding of the responses, if there's a significant number of responses that dealt with SPED or concerns, that'll come out there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Given that 10% of these folks who responded, close to 10%, said that no matter what, they're not sending their kids in, does it mean that, or we need to consider that remote learning is always going to be an option? Because it's 500 kids. So when you're thinking about these 3 plans, does it mean that we're always going to have that one option available for those parents who need to access that? There is something available through the state, is that right, already in existence?
There's nothing yet. There is some discussion about, would the state ever invest in like an online platform that they would make available to all districts? It's in the discussion phases. Nothing has been definitive yet. I think the other thing that was interesting is that statement was in there about providing the remote option in the written document. But then on a call we were on last week with, I don't think it was the commissioner, but it was with other DESI officials, they were kind of backing off that statement. And it was kind of a qualified statement that if you had a particular medical need, you had to provide that. Now, we would provide a remote option under those circumstances anyway, but we wouldn't provide that for just a student that just didn't want to come to school. So the question is going to become, what is the district really legally obligated to
Required to do.
provide and required to provide, as opposed to like an option? And that's what we're pushing on to try to get some definitive, because it's a big swing. If you're talking about a specialized program for half a dozen or, a dozen students, that's one thing. If you're talking about a specialized program for 400 students, that's a different thing. I'm most concerned about the flux too, that, we just can't plan. If you can elect to do the remote and then a week later decide to come in, if that's not working for you, do you go back to the remote? It's going to be very difficult for us to manage in our existing structure, and that's what concerns me at this point with that option.
Other questions?
Just a comment, the Department of Education is also recommending a full return to school. So both,
Oh, this is from them, yeah.
yeah, but I meant at the federal level.
Federal.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
they came out with it today.
Okay.
yeah.
And I can just tell you, I mean, my position on it
Pediatricians.
is I'm not going to support a return to school until doctors and scientists tell me
Yeah,
otherwise.
Absolutely, and
Yep.
I think, my point is that it's,
There's pressure.
the push, right, is at all levels. So we know that some school districts have already come out with their plan. Was it really a plan, or was it more of a report? Because I know that, parents have obviously seen, in particular, one district nearby that had posted their plan.
There's one infamous district that posted a plan prematurely, in my opinion, and it actually didn't follow the DESI guidance. I can't speak to the individual circumstances within that district. I think it's maybe for that district, it's a roadmap that works for them. I don't know what was involved in the planning or not, but I think one of the difficult things, and this came up in my call today, we don't want to be in a situation where we're pitting one district against another.
Correct.
Or what works for one district may not work for another. So that's the struggle that we're having at the state level. It's nice for them to just kind of, give a dictate or say, here's what you're gonna do. But in the same respect, if it doesn't work for your community, we've always enjoyed some level of local control and being able to, as long as we're meeting and addressing certain elements, having it be allowable. So that's what
Absolutely.
we're struggling with.
And I completely agree with you, but, when these things become public,
Right,
then people have questions about, well, where's Chelmsford?
right.
And I think it's important that they understand that, that we are in the middle of this process, and that we're trying to come up with the best plan for our school district, which
Right.
may not be the same as another school district. so.
And again, I mean, there's 351 communities in the state. Yes, one community put a plan out. I don't know to what level, but 350 did not. And, I don't know that we're in a situation to put a plan out without additional guidance coming from the from the state to tell us what we're gonna do.
We'll also collaborate too with area districts that
Absolutely,
we
yeah.
typically do this
Right.
kind of work. This is how we got through the remote piece.
Right.
It was like, what do you have, what do you have, how do you do it? And then even within the school district, each school has their own unique needs. So it's nice that we at least have those contacts, and try and come up with the best possible scenarios.
So we don't come back to meet again until the end of July. So that's a long time away,
28th.
right? Is there some way that we could put out information to parents about what the timeline is so that they understand what the, what we're doing over the next several weeks? Because, I know, what the process is, either in talking to
Right.
people in this district or going through it in another district. But I think that sometimes the not knowing just generates anxiety and concern. So I think that if we had, a timeline of when parents can expect information
Right.
and what the process is, that might help.
Yeah, what I would just say is, let me get through the working group meeting next week. And then by the end of next week, I have no problem sending out a communication. Again, not locked in.
I know.
But just kind of giving a general calendar of like what we hope to be able to convey and when to allow parents to make those decisions.
Right.
I can get that out next week.
Right, and then also why it's, because
Yeah.
we don't have the information from the state,
Right,
so.
that's fine.
All right, anything else on school planning? Okay, a couple updates.
Yeah, just a few verbal updates for you. Us. There obviously, we had a few communications, we've had some discussions about diversity and equity in our schools. I have been in communication with a group of recent alumni to talk about, their experiences and recommendations or whatnot. Just because of scheduling issues around the 4th, it was a little difficult to meet, but we are meeting tomorrow evening. So I have that scheduled. I'll hopefully be able to report back on the 28th, kind of what happened with that and some of the different work that's ongoing and will be going on next year. But the group seems very nice, and we were able to agree on a time to meet, so that'll be tomorrow night. And like I said, I'll be able to report back. Couple things on just the CPS website design. That work is ongoing. I met with the contractor last week to just take a look at what they call wireframes. It's basically just the sketch-out design of the site and how it will look. So we need to provide some feedback to them by the end of this week. And then in a couple weeks' time, by the end of July, they'll take those revisions into consideration and actually add color to it and all of that. So it is going to start to come together. So the group that's been looking at the website will get an email from me with those wireframe designs.
Okay.
We're going to have a pretty quick turnaround, though, and in a couple days' times, give them some feedback, and then we're going to lock into that. So we're still on target for a fall launch of the new site. The old site is going to stay up and going until we cut over to the new one. Joanna, do you just have some quick numbers on where we stand registration-wise for
Sure.
busing?
So as of today, we had 1,291 students registered to ride the bus. Just as a reminder, last year we transported 3,385 students on 29 buses. That made 3 runs a day. Just a reminder, everybody has to register each year, even if you're free.
That number is just for historicals. That number is down compared to what we normally would get.
That number is down. Last year, at this time, we were at 2,251.
Right. So, I mean, that is, again, it's just significant in our planning. But I am glad and appreciative of the people that did register, just to give us some hard numbers to be able to work from. So that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then just last for me, staff hiring update. We're actually doing remarkably well with our hiring for the fall. We had made a couple of tweaks to contract language in our last teacher negotiation around posting times and the whole process. We're down to 3 or 4 professional positions at this point that are still required to be filled for the fall. So coming in after July 4th to just have 3 or 4 positions left, and there's interview panels in process for them at this point. So I think we're really in great shape on that front. We typically aren't at this point until August. So we're ahead of the game. I think getting also the budget approved by the town, allowing us to lock into our staffing model for next year, really helped. So on the 28th, I will ask Cheryl, she usually does the updated hiring report for the second meeting of the month, so we'll have that. And I'm really hoping at that point in time that we're fully staffed for the fall.
Okay, any questions on any of the updates?
With regards to the diversity and equity process, we also maybe look at a timeline for that as well, in terms of, I know we're going to have a working group in place that will be taking a look at some of our curriculum materials and things like that, but just as we go forward, a timeline for, when these things are going to be happening, so that way, as we're talking about this at school committee meetings, we have, specific things that we can point to that,
Right.
We're addressing based on the input that we're going to get from the group and that we receive from the community as well.
Yeah, I think the hard part for me is I don't want to predetermine what work or even like timelines might come from this because I haven't met with the group yet.
Right.
So I really wanted to start with that conversation and then hear them out, hear any suggestions they might have, bring it back to this group and have some discussion and see, which directions we may want to move in. And, what we can actually do, when we can accomplish it, who's going to have to be involved. But I didn't want to put anything out ahead of time without kind of hearing what the concerns were.
Absolutely. And I think that makes sense. I just don't want it to kind of fall by the wayside because we have all this other.
Well, yeah, there is a lot of stuff going on.
No, I understand that, but this is important too, so,
Well, this is very important. What I'm going to recommend is, I think that it's very important that you meet with this group. Absolutely. I'm glad you're listening. I think that's very important. But I think we as a committee need to make sure that we're on top of this and that we either put out a statement, put out a timeline, do something within the next the next meeting or sometime this summer. I think it really should occur. I have a list of like 9 different items that I would really like to see us accomplish as an education group. Donna was part of the listening group too for the select board meeting. I was as well. At that select board meeting, I recommended that one of the things that should happen is training for all elected officials in the town. But I think that group, when they were speaking and they were giving their testimony and so on, they were looking for the school committee and the school system to be a major impactor of some change in the future here. And so I think it's very important for us as a school committee to take a position to do it, where it's on record, and this is what we're going to do, and these are our goals, and this is what we're going to accomplish. And I totally agree that we are in the middle of a lot of work here. But hopefully, this is not really a lot of work. What this really is helping so that the issue is at the front of when we're doing any particular thing, because this is an attitude shift. It's just making sure that people react in a way that is just for all, including Black, multi-ethnic, diverse groups that are within the system. So I would like to see something happen in terms of, and I agree that you should definitely meet with these folks, but at the next meeting, I think it would be important to have this on the agenda and for us as a group to take some position on what we're going to do. If not at the next meeting, then definitely within the next couple of meetings. It's that important to people, to everyone, I think.
And Dennis, we were wondering if Maria and I could get in touch with MASC to see if they would be willing to, in our November conference, maybe have some workshops.
If they have a November conference.
Good point. But maybe
I would, yeah,
to
definitely
make
reach out
that
and see if-
recommendation,
yeah.
as part of the art training,
Yeah. Yep.
So, we'd be happy to do that.
by all
if
means.
That's okay?
Yep.
All right.
Yes. And I thought it was really good that Tricia, the town clerk's office, said immediately that for elected officials, she put in the chat that she would be happy to help facilitate. So I think that there's a willingness and an openness, and that as a group, we're that important in this particular issue, because we've got the young minds here and the young hearts, the same thing. And it's part of our social emotional context of things. So that's my input on that. I'm not gonna read out my list right now because I'm gonna let you go ahead and meet with these young folks who will give you some of these things already, I think.
Okay, anything else on the updated items? Okay, so the next item is executive session, so we're gonna move that, if everybody's okay with it.
We do action, new items?
Huh?
Action?
I know, but we're gonna
Oh,
have to
sorry,
move,
yes.
it just going in order in the agenda.
Oh,
We're gonna
sorry,
move the
yes.
executive session till after the next few items, so that when we
Okay.
adjourn from regular session, we don't have to come back into regular session, or adjourn to executive session, we don't have to come back in. So if everybody's okay with that, list-wise, it is the next item, but let's go and do the reports and action items, and then at the end of the meeting, we can go to executive session, so. All right, so, having said that, any liaison reports? Rhea,
I
you have
do.
it? Yeah.
I went to, and I actually truly enjoyed this meeting, the Economic Development Council met. Now, that's from the town is Evan Belansky, Lisa Marone, who's the town's Director of Business Development, and the chair is Donald Van Dyne. And they had some pretty good updates. Thermo Fisher, a huge life sciences and technology company, has agreed to 113,000 square feet. And they currently have about 85,000 in the district. They're gonna be spending 40 to 60 million in investment on this building. The Press Cafe is coming to town. Yes.
Really?
They're going to expand out from Burlington and Nashua to Chelmsford. They'll be at 330 Billerica Road, which I thought was great. They accepted the 100,000 incentive grant to increase their footprint at Chelmsford. We have now a bus shelter on Route 129, which is nice for some of our families who may be coming in from out of town or have to travel to other cities or towns to obtain benefits and so on. I'd like to update you that the Short Film Drive-In Festival is coming, August 29th. That's Chelmsford Telemedia. Only 100 tickets will be available for cars. So if you're interested, reach out to get those. Food trucks will be available. And that's what this committee is working on. Watch the Q TV show. They suggested for some issues. And the other thing is that there are some pretty large apartment building developments that are gonna come up for approval pretty soon. And also, Evan updated me on what was happening with the 58 Hunt Road. So there are 3 buildings, they're considered 3 phases.
Yeah.
The first one will be occupied and completed, 24 units, by the end of December, beginning of
This year.
January, which could impact us.
Excuse me, Maria, those are gonna be apartments or condos?
These are apartments.
They are apartments, okay.
They are 84 units in this entire development. The first one is 24 units. The second one will be 36 units, and that's by February. And then the third one, which is building number 1, will be another 24 units, and that's by March, April. So it's all within our school year, and it's 84 total units. So Evan updated on that 58 Hunt Road. And
84 units.
that's the one near Enterprise Bank on
Going right across from
110.
Enterprise Bank?
Yeah,
Okay,
so I'll give you these things again
all right, thank you.
on the dates, but it's all within our school year, and it's 84 units.
Did he happen to mention, like, some of them, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom?
I asked that question, I returned that question to him, so I was waiting for that update. He was going directly to the developer
Okay,
to get a more direct update.
yeah, that would be good to know.
It was astounding to me, the number of units that may come in the next few years,
Beyond Hunt Road.
beyond this, including that 35-acre parcel. That was the UMass potential campus
West-
that is no
West
longer.
Campus. Yep.
Yeah, that's being looked at for apartments, so a
That was
substantial.
gonna be a 55 and
I thought
older.
that was
55 and
72.
over.
There's a lot of things, they're gonna have a big discussion coming up at one of their meetings on this. The other 2 was the mill across from the establishment
Yeah.
Yeah.
is being considered also 4 units. And then 5965 Princeton Drive is another one. So there's a lot in the works right now, just so that we know this.
I think the sign says on Hunt Road, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom.
Yes, it's substantial
I don't know
number.
how many of which, but
I had asked what's,
Did he talk at all about the pricing?
15.
about what?
The value, like the
Yeah, did he talk
the
about how much
rates?
it is?
He did not talk about how much it is. I was looking at signs around there to see what's available. There isn't much available. The other thing that's big is that Thermo Fisher coming in and expanding to, 3 times its current size, which will likely lead to more people wanting to stay in town. And that's a pretty large company, multinational in scope. They're very happy about this because that building hasn't been touched, and it's a 40 to 60 million investment by Thermo Fisher with an option to purchase this coming year. So they may be here for quite some time.
I'll call Evan about the Hunt Road.
It was good.
Yeah, did they happen to mention, like, does it have a name? You know how there's the Kensington, there's the Chelmsford Woods? Does this have a name
I didn't
yet?
ask.
Okay.
I haven't seen the name yet.
Donnie, you have
Just to see for
something?
advertising.
A different action item.
What school district is that? Which?
Fine.
Fine.
Other liaison reports?
Not liaison, sorry.
Okay, Jeff, liaison, no? Okay. I have one, so the Boosters Club is going to be sponsoring a blood drive on July 15th and 16th in the parking lot of the high school.
Okay.
It will be an appointment-only blood drive with social distancing measures. So if you want to give blood, you have to go on to the website. So if you can go through the Boosters Club Facebook page, there's a link. I think Mass General Hospital is going to be the one sponsoring it and running it. So there'll be the 15th and 16th at the high school parking lot. So. Okay, any action items, new items? Donna?
Except one. For Sudeep and Katrina, can we get them the packet for the meetings in advance, maybe email it to them?
Usually they don't go in the summer. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see them here.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't
Oh, they
usually-
had said they would be interested, but I even meant, even if
Right,
it's in the fall, it doesn't
Yeah, yeah,
matter. But can we, do they get the packets
Well, they can get the electronic one.
from
The
our
website?
website?
Yeah.
All right, well, I mean, it would be nice if we sent it to them. They are a part of the group.
Well, you don't send it out here, we actually access it on
Drop-
Dropbox. We wouldn't
Dropbox.
put them
No,
on
I wouldn't do that.
Dropbox, they would have to actually grab
Let me
the.
talk to them.
The other thing is to ask the high school if they have chosen a couple of reps for the coming year, because quite a few of the end-of-the-year things didn't happen, like elections for next year. So you may want to reach out, and I think we should, and ask that. Some other end-of-the-year things didn't happen either, that I think have left some questions.
They were both
Some
underclassmen,
people.
right? They were-
Yes.
They're both underclassmen.
Sophomore
yeah.
and junior.
Sudeep is a junior, going to be a senior, and Katrina was a
Right.
sophomore, going to be a
I
junior.
think it's the other way around.
No.
No, I think she's.
Katrina is a sophomore, going to be a junior. She's in my kid's class.
She's the sophomore?
Yeah,
Yes,
I was right.
You were right, I was less right.
yes. And he's, I think, VP of his class
Oh,
this
he is?
coming year.
So you pointed at me. I was like,
All right, other new items, John?
I do have one. So I actually had a statement kind of written up, but rather than do that, I think I'll kind of hold on to that based on however this goes. So recently, there has been a real national conversation, both from politicians and the news, around the curriculum and how we teach our children. So one of the things that's come out of it, and I've heard this in numerous places across social media, the news, again, from national politicians and debates, is that we are teaching our students to hate America. And I'm sure some of the people have heard some of this chatter, and it's really been amplified a lot on social media, and there's really an undercurrent of people saying it. And there are people in Chelmsford that believe this. And it's just a really unfortunate situation, and this has been spoken by prominent members of national politics, and I don't want to get into the national side of it, but I think the work, and this is actually, and just in regards to administrative, this really has nothing to do with you, right? This is a school committee thing, so please don't take offense. We as a school committee have work to do, and that work is things like fiscal transparency, making sure the books are in order, making sure that Jay is doing the work he's supposed to do, and it really enacting smart policy and making sure we're doing things the right way. But aside from our obligations and our work, we also have a duty to the people of Chelmsford and to this body. And when there is a national discussion about the quality, and really this isn't even about quality, this is talking about subversion of our children, right? We have a duty to protect public schools, and we have, most importantly, a duty to protect this body. So and again, rather than reading this, I would just like to ask, and I hope I'll have the support of the committee, I would like to propose an agenda item to have a discussion and perhaps a debate and public input on either releasing a statement, kind of reaffirming our commitment to civic education for our students and looking for ways to improve, as well as rejecting that narrative, because I think anybody that knows Chelmsford is one of the most patriotic places I've ever lived, right? And I would like to have on the agenda discussion, a debate, and perhaps either release our own statement or perhaps pressure or request from the MASC, which I think would be a better move, to release a statement really rejecting that narrative. It's important to me, and I hope I'll have your support, and that is my request for an agenda item. And I will read this if we decide to discuss it in public.
Great. All right, any other new items?
Great.
Okay, any new public comment that people received? Yes, no?
We've discussed most of it.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay. Just in Maria mentioned some feedback she's getting about us meeting tonight and you know, whether we should be wearing masks, all that. I mean, I think we, you know, before the meeting, the room was sanitized. I think we're properly distanced here. I think just the operation of the committee, much more efficient in this format than the online. I think we did well with the online, but I think just the discussions, everything else that we had tonight was just more open than we'd be able to do. You know, if you'd watched our last meeting, we did discuss this, and people did have the option of coming in remotely if they wanted to. And I think the general consensus was that people felt comfortable. There's only 8 of us in here right now, and again, we're fairly well spaced out. The windows are open. If you can't tell from home, Donna, open up all the windows and let all the humid air in here. So
Shut off the
I
air
think the
conditioning.
superintendent's lost about 27 pounds during this meeting, but we are taking it very seriously and taking the precautions. And you know, if anybody after this meeting doesn't feel comfortable, again, the option to come in remotely is certainly there, or to wear a mask or whatever people feel comfortable with.
I think the fact that we are the school committee and that these comments were being made while we're here at a meeting without masks, I want people to feel certain that we will follow guidelines and that we're here to try to instill as much safety as we can in the process. I think that that's very important. From home, I don't remember ever seeing the entire room, the windows open, the distancing of everyone. It's important that people realize that, but I think also people are reading more and more about the fact that the virus may be airborne, and so people are concerned about that. And the couple of comments I did receive at the beginning of the meeting, I'm horrified that people aren't wearing masks, is important that Dennis say just what he just did, so I appreciate that, so that people realize what the room structure is. And we are setting policy for the coming year, so I think that that's important for people to realize that we do take safety concerns into consideration, and we're being careful.
And I think that it's also important that people understand that we knowingly and willingly agreed to do this, because we recognize that there's a lot of work that needs to happen, and that we have to be able to be at our best in terms of being efficient and productive in these meetings, so that we can answer the questions that so many people have concerns about what September is going to look like. And I think that it just, for me, I feel like it feels like it was a more productive meeting, being in person. So I understand people's concerns, and I appreciate that. But you know, I also know as an elected school committee member, I also have a duty to make sure that we're, you know, doing what we need to do to get the schools ready for September. And that's going to be a lot of hard work. And, you know, we have to be prepared to do that. Not unsafely, but we have to be here to do it.
All right, any other public comment? Okay. All right, so, at this point, we are going to adjourn to executive session, so I'll take a motion.
I move that we adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may be detrimental with regards to the effect of bargaining or litigating the position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
Second.
And further not to return to open session.
And to further not to return to open session.
Second, great. Okay, so we'll take a vote. Maria?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Aye.
Jeff? Yeah? Donna?
Aye.
I know she's laughing because you have to be the secretary and take the notes, so
Thank you.
aye, so
I am
5-0.
so happy right now. You don't even
Okay,
know.
thank you very much.
Take a 5-minute.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll come back to.
Oh, my gosh.